What if demons aren't just myths, but fragments of a forgotten truth? In the depths of Hindu mythology lies a world where mercy and enlightenment do not reign. There dwell immortal demons, cruel spirits, and shadows that move even when no one is watching. They never vanished. They're merely waiting for their moment. Today we will explore the darkest depths of Hindu demonology, uncovering who the Asuras, Rakshas, Daityas, Danavas, and Pishachas truly are, why they fought the gods, how they came into existence, and why their influence still lingers in rituals, legends, and perhaps even in our fears. But before we dive into this story, welcome to the Dark Storyteller channel. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Now relax and let yourself slip into the mysterious world of esoteric knowledge. Imagine a temple where the air is thick with the scent of sandalwood and jasmine, where a priest with sacred ash on his forehead lifts prayers into the fire. But behind the light, there are shadows where mantras echo. Something deeper sleeps beneath the earth. Demons that were here long before the temples were built, before the Rig Veda was ever uttered. And although Hinduism is often seen as a religion of inner illumination and cyclical rebirth, at its heart pulses a darkness, unseen, yet indispensable. This is not simply a battle between good and evil. It is something far deeper, a conflict of forces that both create and destroy. Hinduism does not shy away from darkness. It weaves it into the very structure of the cosmos. In ancient cosmogonic texts, such as the Srimad Bhagavatam, Devi Bhagavata Purana, and the Mahabharata, the demonic is not merely folklore. It is an integral part of the cycle of creation, destruction, and renewal. One cannot exist without the other. Asuras, demons, are not simply evil forces. They are co-creators of reality. According to legend, at the beginning of creation, two lineages were born from one sage. Kashyapa, his two wives, Diti and Aditi, gave birth to two races, the Daityas and the Devas. The Daityas, children of darkness, the Devas, sons of light. But they were not enemies from birth. Their conflict evolved slowly, rooted in a longing for equality, power, and justice. The most famous among the Daityas, Hiranyakashipu, did not seek evil for evil's sake. He sought immortality, wisdom, and parity with the gods. Yet his pride, like that of many demons, led to his fall. His son Prahlada, by contrast, became a devoted Vaishnava. And here lies the hint. Not all demons are hopelessly dark, and not all gods are flawless. A religion that embraces thousands of gods does not reject the multiplicity of truth. Asuras are not destroyed. They are exiled. Their power lies not in brute destruction, but in knowledge, seduction, and magic. One of the oldest texts, the Rig Veda, doesn't initially describe Asuras as demons, but as mighty beings, often superior to the Devas. In some hymns, Varuna or Mitra are called Asuras who wield cosmic order. Only over time did the word become synonymous with evil. What changed? Some researchers believe the term Asura shifted from mighty being to demon due to political, cultural, and religious transitions during the later Vedic period. Beings who didn't conform to the newly rising Vedic pantheon were reimagined. Their strength didn't disappear. It was pushed into the shadows, where it grew even more dangerous. And in that shadow, behind the veil of time, arose entities that even the gods feared. Rakshas, those who devour flesh. In legend, they change shape, hypnotize, live in dark forests, near burning grounds, even in the palaces of kings. They're not merely monsters, but metaphors for the dangers of the human soul: anger, envy, greed. The most famous Rakshas Ravana, king of Lanka. But was he truly evil? He was a scholar of Vedic wisdom, a musician, a poet, a devotee of Shiva. His greatest flaw, pride. But is that not deeply human? And then there are the Pishachas. Unlike Asuras or Rakshas, Pishachas are not primordial demons, but corrupted souls, those twisted by hatred, revenge or injustice. They are the echo of trauma that never found peace. Ancient texts warn if someone dies unfairly or in anger, they may become a Pishacha. Even today, certain homes are ritually cleansed in India, as it is believed that these energies can remain. In some villages, offerings of food or flowers are still made to appease them. Darkness in Hindu belief is not taboo, it is embraced. Shiva, one of the Trimurti Trinity, is not just the god of creation, but of destruction. His epithet, Bhairava, is terrifying, devouring, the guardian of cremation grounds. He is revered by those seeking truth beyond the ordinary. Through him, certain sects, like the Agoras, perform rituals on burned corpses, consume flesh, meditate among skulls. For them, a demon is not an enemy. It is a facet of the divine that must be understood. In some South Indian temples, you can still find sculptures of demons bowing before the gods. But look closer, some gods bear the features of demons. There is an ancient cult of the god Ayyappa, born of the union between Shiva and the demoness Mohini. His origin is mixed, his essence, the union of light and shadow, and there are many such examples. In the temple of Narasimha, the avatar of Vishnu, with the body of a man and head of a lion, worship is performed through rites resembling spirit invocation. The world of demons, in Hinduism, is not black and white, it is complex, just like human nature. There are ancient texts that openly describe instructions for summoning asuras. The Atharvaveda, for example, includes mantras, used not only for protection but for aggression, against enemies, spirits, even gods. This is magic rooted in power, and although long forbidden, its echoes still live in folk culture, in the whispers of elders, in night terrors, in stories that somehow frighten adults more than children. Darkness in Hindu belief is not the absence of light, it is its complement. Without it, no god has power, no hero, a victory. And when we read of Vishnu slaying Hiranyakashipu, or Rama defeating Ravana, we are not witnessing a crusade of good versus evil. It is a mythological allegory of inner conflict. Sometimes the demon is a part of us we're too afraid to admit, but only by acknowledging it can we become whole. This is only the first step into the abyss. Soon we will go deeper into the classification of demons, their kingdoms, secret knowledge, and the reasons why they still affect modern culture. Because what if some of these beings never truly left our world? Who dwells in the dark side of Hinduism? This question is not rhetorical. It echoes through the corridors of ancient temples, through the pages of forbidden texts, and in the haunted dreams of mystics who dared to look too deep. Hindu demonology is not a list of monsters to be feared. It is a mirror, a reflection of the chaos buried beneath the surface of order. And when we look closely into that mirror, we find 5 primary forms staring back: Asuras, Rakshas, Daityas, Danavas, and Pishachas. These are not mere stories. They are living forces, archetypes of primal emotion and ancient knowledge, creatures forged from pain, power, and rebellion, each with a purpose, a philosophy, and a warning. The Asuras were not born evil. The Asuras were not born evil. In the earliest Vedic hymns, they were praised as divine beings, powerful forces that governed the cosmos. Alongside the Devas, the word Asura originally meant possessor of life force or lord of breath, and in some of the Rig Vedic hymns, even gods like Varuna and Mitra are called Asuras. But over time, a divide occurred, ideological, not just spiritual. The Devas became symbols of order, sacrifice, and cosmic law. The Asuras, by contrast, began to question that order. They were the thinkers, the challengers, the ones who said, "Why should we bow?" That question, that defiance, led to their demonization, and thus they became the fallen, the exiled, the rejected sons of the universe. But they didn't vanish. They built their own empires in the underworld, Patala, cities of gold and fire, filled with labyrinthine libraries of forbidden knowledge. Bali, one of the most revered Asuras, was so noble that even Vishnu granted him rule over the underworld. Is this evil or misunderstood power? Then there are the Rakshas, terrifying, flesh-eating entities that haunt epic tales like the Ramayana and Mahabharata. They are masters of illusion, shapeshifters who can appear as anything: a beautiful woman, a child, a god. But beneath the disguise, they are predators, feeding on fear, blood, and spiritual weakness. Yet even they are not purely malevolent. Some Rakshasas are protectors. Vibhishana, the brother of Ravana, stood for dharma and righteousness, even against his own kin. This duality is crucial. Rakshasas are not chaos for the sake of chaos. They are guardians of the threshold. They test the intentions of those who wander too close to power, and if you fail that test, they consume you body and soul. Deeper still dwell the Daityas, giants born of Diti, the mother of sorrow. Their very name pulses with rage. These are not demons who whisper, they roar, colossal beings who challenge the gods not out of spite, but out of grief. The Daityas carry the burden of betrayal. Their blood remembers the moment they were cast aside, punished for seeking equality with the Devas. Among them was Hiranyaksha, who plunged the earth into the cosmic ocean, forcing Vishnu to incarnate as a boar to rescue it. His brother, Hiranyakashipu, sought to conquer death itself. His own son defied him, and yet his story became one of the most sacred in Vaishnavism, a demon king whose martyrdom gave rise to divine truth. These contradictions are not mistakes, they are keys. The Daityas are the embodiment of a terrible wisdom, that righteousness does not always wear the face of light. Close cousins of the Daityas are the Danavas, another race, descended from Kashyapa and Danu, the goddess of primal waters. While the Daityas are warriors, the Danavas are scholars, philosophers, and magicians. They are the intellect of the infernal. In the Mahabharata, Danavas are said to have mastered the sciences, the stars, and the secrets of divine weapons. Their downfall was not their brutality, but their brilliance. They weaponized thought itself. In some tantric traditions, Danava knowledge is still sought by sadhus and mystics, encoded in mantras too dangerous to chant aloud. Some whisper that the Danavas built machines powered by mantra vibrations, that they unlock gateways between worlds, and that the echoes of their experiments still reverberate in haunted corners of the Himalayas. Their cities, now lost, were said to be invisible to the human eye, hidden between dimensions, accessible only through dreams or death. And then, there are the Pishachas. These are not gods, not fallen angels, not titanic beings of cosmic rebellion. They are the residue of madness, creatures of decay, hungry spirits born from violent death, suicide, murder, betrayal. They feed not on flesh, but on the rotting emotions left behind. Wherever there is war, wherever blood stains the ground, and cries go unanswered, the Pishachas gather like carrion crows of the astral realm. Ancient Ayurvedic texts even mention them, not as myths, but as causes of insanity. It was believed that they could possess a person, twist their mind, drive them to incoherent rage or despair. In villages across India, rituals to expel them are still performed. Priests chant protective verses, sprinkle holy ash, burn neem leaves, not for superstition, but because sometimes the madness isn't psychological. Sometimes it stares back at you. But the most terrifying truth is that none of these beings are truly gone. Their names may be buried in scriptures, their temples razed, their stories rewritten, but they remain, in metaphor, in dream, in the subconscious, They are the parts of us we're taught to ignore, the anger we suppress, the questions we don't dare ask, the temptations we silently entertain. When we look at the Asuras, we see our defiance; in the Rakshas, our hidden appetites; in the Daityas, our rage; in the Danavas, our dangerous intelligence; and in the Pishachas, our brokenness. Every culture has demons, but in Hinduism, they are not anomalies. They are woven into the divine. They are not banished. They are acknowledged, confronted, integrated. The architecture of ancient India reveals this secret visually. Many temples, especially those of Shiva, include depictions of demonic figures, not at war with the divine, but guarding it. Door guardians known as Dvarapalas often have terrifying, monstrous features. They are not to be destroyed, but respected. They stand as a warning. You cannot approach divinity without confronting your darkness. This echoes the tantric principle that the path to enlightenment is not through denial, but through transformation. Demons are not to be feared. They are to be understood. Their defeat is not their destruction, but their absorption. Even the sacred dance of Shiva, the Tandava, is a cosmic destruction, a purification by fire, and beneath his feet, crushed and broken, lies the demon, Apasmara, the symbol of ignorance, not killed, trampled, held in place, contained. Because ignorance cannot be destroyed, it can only be subdued. The ancient texts did not shy away from the terrifying. They embraced it. In the Devi Mahatmya, the goddess Durga does not merely slay demons, she becomes them. Kali, her most fearsome form, wears a necklace of skulls, drinks the blood of the wicked, and dances on the battlefield. But she is not evil, she is liberation, terrifying to the ego, but compassionate to the soul. And so we return to the question, who dwells in the dark side of Hinduism? The answer is not demons, it is us, the fragmented selves we have yet to reclaim, the exiled thoughts, emotions, impulses. The gods are not separate from the demons, they are their reflection. In every story of triumph, the demon plays the necessary role of initiator. No hero is born without a monster, no light shines without contrast, and no soul ascends without first descending. So the next time you light a candle before a deity, remember, there are shadows in the room with you. They watch, they wait, and they whisper, not to frighten, but to remind you. The journey inward is not through golden clouds, but through dark forests, where every rustle of leaves might be a voice you've forgotten, or a truth you're not yet ready to face. Because perhaps the real horror is not in the demons themselves, but in how much of them we carry inside. Before the gods took their place in the heavens, before the stars aligned to form the order of Dharma, there were the Asuras. Their name now echoes with menace. Demons, corruptors, destroyers. But that was not always their role. In the oldest layers of Hindu scripture, the Asuras were not enemies of the divine. They were divine, equal to the gods, kin to the devas, born of the same cosmic breath, children of the same primordial mind. But something changed, something ancient and unresolved, and from that fracture, a new narrative emerged, one of defiance, exile, and forgotten power. In the Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts known to humanity, the term Asura was originally a title of honor. Varuna, the guardian of cosmic law, is repeatedly called an Asura, a being of immense power and divine authority. So is Mitra, the god of truth and friendship. The word itself comes from the root asu, meaning life force or breath, and in its earliest usage, it implied sovereignty, potency, control over unseen forces. In those hymns, the Asuras were not evil. They were the lords of breath and shadow, the forces behind what was seen and what was hidden. But as time passed, the axis of language began to tilt, as the Brahmanical class consolidated religious authority, and as new gods, especially Indra, Agni, and later Vishnu, rose to prominence, the meaning of Asura began to shift. Those who did not align with the celestial order were slowly rebranded. They were recast, not as co-creators, but as rebels, not brothers of the gods, but their sworn enemies. Thus began the slow transformation, from respected beings of power to demonic adversaries. But the ancient texts never fully erased the truth. The Asuras did not fall because they were evil, they fell because they refused to kneel. According to myth, the universe was once undivided. The Devas and the Asuras shared the realms. They drank from the same sacred rivers, worshipped the same fire, and upheld the same Vedic laws. But the Asuras were different in spirit. They were intense, focused not on harmony, but on mastery. While the Devas celebrated rituals and upheld the balance of the cosmos, the Asuras pursued knowledge, strength, and control. They were not content to merely exist within the structure of Dharma. They wanted to reshape it. One of the most significant moments in their mythic history is the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. Both Devas and Asuras took part in this cosmic task, churning the ocean to obtain Amrita, the nectar of immortality. It was an alliance born not of trust, but of necessity. They used the serpent Vasuki as a rope, and Mount Mandara as the churning rod. The process released poisons and treasures, culminating in the appearance of Dhanvantari, bearing the pot of Amrita. The Asuras claimed it. They believed they had earned it, but through illusion, Vishnu tricked them, taking the form of Moshini, a celestial enchantress, and gave the elixir to the Devas. From that betrayal, the rift became permanent. The Asuras were cast down into Patala, the netherworld, their ambitions shattered, but their fire unquenched. That fire would burn across countless yugas. Among the most powerful Asuras was Mahabali, the grandson of Prala, and ruler of all three worlds. He was wise, just, and beloved by his people. He performed Ashwamedha sacrifices, gave freely to the poor, and ruled with fairness. But his power grew too great. Even the Devas grew fearful. Vishnu, incarnated as Vamana, a dwarf Brahmin, approached Bali and asked for 3 steps of land. The Asura king agreed. In a moment, Vamana expanded into a colossal form, the Trivikrama, covering the sky and the earth in 2 strides. With no land left, Bali offered his head for the 3rd step. Vishnu pushed him into the underworld, but granted him rule over it. In Kerala, he is still remembered during Onam as a noble golden king, a demon, remembered not for destruction, but for Dharma. Again, the pattern repeats. The Asura is not evil, he is powerful, and punished for it. Another terrifying yet complex figure is Hiranyakashipu, whose name means clothed in gold. He sought immortality through penance, meditating for thousands of years, until he gained a boon from Brahma. He could not be killed by man or beast, day or night, inside or outside, on earth or in the sky, by any weapon. He believed himself invincible. He outlawed the worship of Vishnu, demanded to be treated as a god, but his son Prala remained faithful to Vishnu, chanting his name even under torture. When Hiranyakashipu tried to kill him, Vishnu manifested as Narasimha, the man-lion, emerging from a pillar at twilight on a threshold, placing the king on his lap and tearing him apart with claws. Every condition circumvented, every ego destroyed. But consider this, a demon so determined, so intelligent, that only the divine could invent a loophole to defeat him. What does that say about the power he held? The Asuras were not ignorant brutes. They were scholars, mystics, strategists. Shukracharya, the guru of the Asuras, was the master of Mistrita Sanjivani, the science of resurrecting the dead. The Devas had no answer to his powers. His knowledge of Tantra and astrology was so profound that some believe fragments of his teachings survive in hidden lineages. Even today, he taught that power without wisdom is ruin, and wisdom without power is slavery. This was the heart of Asura philosophy, not surrender, but self-mastery. In the Devi Mahatmya, The demon brothers Shumba and Nishumba wage war against the gods, and are ultimately slain by the goddess Durga. But before their fall, they offer the Devi a strange proposal: join us, rule by our side. It is not a demand of conquest, but of union. She declines, and the battle begins. But the proposal reveals a core truth. The Asuras never wanted annihilation. They wanted recognition, power, their place in the cosmic order. Their sin was not darkness, it was ambition. There are temples in India where the imagery of Asuras remains, not as foes but as protectors. In Khajuraho and Elara, carvings of Asura figures depict them in complex roles, some fighting, some meditating, some teaching. In tantric iconography, the Asura is not excluded. He becomes the vehicle of transformation. Kali, when invoked in her fiercest forms, is said to ride an Asura. She does not destroy him. She uses his power to break illusion. In modern psychological terms, the Asura represents the ego, not evil in itself, but dangerous when untethered from compassion. It is the inner drive that wants more, that questions limits, that refuses to accept less than everything. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of two types of beings, the divine and the demonic, but he does not suggest one is to be hated. He says the demonic nature leads to bondage, the divine to liberation, yet both are within us. The path is not to destroy the Asura within, but to transcend it. There are whispers in certain spiritual circles that the Asuras never truly left, that they walk among us, not as horned beasts, but as minds that refuse to conform. Visionaries, rebels, scientists who disrupt the flow of accepted truths. They say that those who challenge the gods of the age are always branded demons, until they are proven right. Perhaps that is why the stories of Asuras persist, not as warnings, but as seeds. There is a haunting beauty in their downfall, because it is never complete. Every time an Asura is slain, his story is remembered. His name becomes legend. His death becomes a doorway. In Bali, in Ravana, in Hiranyakashipu, we see echoes of Prometheus, of Lucifer, of every soul that dared to steal fire from the heavens. And we begin to ask, who truly owns the light? So when you hear the name Asura, do not flinch. Do not imagine a grotesque monster howling in the abyss. Instead, imagine a being of ancient pride and immense will, standing before the gods not in hate, but in challenge, saying, I am not lesser, because I disagree. I am not evil, because I resist. That is the voice of the Asura. It is the whisper beneath every revolution, the ember beneath every sacred fire, and perhaps, just perhaps, it is the voice we silence in ourselves when we choose obedience over truth, because the origin of dark power is not in hatred, it is in courage, the courage to stand alone against the heavens and still believe you belong. They were not born as monsters. They were not forged in hatred or chaos. The Asuras emerged from the same breath that gave rise to the gods, cosmic entities, born of light and shadow, knowledge and desire. But while the Devas upheld the rhythm of the celestial order, the Asuras dared to question it, not out of blind rage, not out of madness, but because they saw something the gods could not, the need for change. The Asuras were not destroyers of truth, but catalysts of transformation. They were the shadows that pushed the light to burn brighter, and yet, history remembers them only as villains. It's time to remember differently. Throughout the ancient scriptures of India, the Asuras appear not as mere enemies of the divine, but as the very tension that drives creation forward. In Hindu cosmology, nothing remains static. The universe is in a constant cycle of birth, preservation, and destruction. And within this cycle, change is the only true constant. It is the Asuras who bring this change. Their very existence forces the world to evolve, to adapt, to grow. Without their opposition, the gods would have no purpose. Without their challenge, the universe would fall into stagnation. Every war they waged, Every question they asked, every throne they threatened, it was a test, not just of power, but of truth. Consider the legend of Prahlada, the son of the Asura king Hiranyakashipu. His father commanded the world, had conquered the heavens, and demanded that all worship him. But Prahlada refused. He remained faithful to Vishnu, even as his father attempted to kill him again and again. But what if we look deeper? Hiranyakashipu was not merely an oppressor. He was a ruler who had achieved the impossible. He meditated for thousands of years, burned his ego in the fires of austerity, and earned a boon from Brahma himself. He transcended death. Almost. His fall came not from cruelty, but from the refusal to accept that something greater than himself still existed. He became the lesson, not the villain. The challenge. His son's devotion could only be tested through his father's tyranny. The Asura, in this story, is not the enemy. He is the crucible. The great epics of India are filled with Asuras whose presence shaped destiny itself. Tarakasura, for instance, was an Asura king who threatened the gods until Shiva and Parvati birthed their son, Kartikeya, who would defeat him. Without Taraka's rebellion, there would be no divine child, no awakening of martial wisdom. In this way, the Asura becomes a midwife to divinity, forcing the birth of something new. Over and over, this theme repeats. Bhasmasura, the Asura who obtained a boon that allowed him to incinerate anyone he touched, chased Shiva himself until Vishnu, in the form of the enchantress Mohini, tricked him into self-destruction. It is a tale told as comedy, but underneath it is a deeper truth. Unchecked ambition leads to ruin, unless it meets beauty, wisdom, and illusion. Mohini, the divine feminine, does not slay the demon with weapons. She seduces him with reflection. She makes him face himself. There is also the story of Shukracharya, the guru of the Asuras, whose wisdom rivaled that of the sages. Unlike Brihaspati, the guru of the Devas, Shukracharya aligned with the underdogs, the rebels. He taught them the Mishrita Sanjivani mantra, a sacred formula capable of raising the dead. For this knowledge, he suffered trials, including having one eye destroyed by Vishnu himself, and yet, he continued. He advised kings like Mahabali, taught diplomacy, strategy, and the use of occult sciences. He was not a priest of darkness. He was a sage who believed that power and truth should not be monopolized by the devas alone. In modern times, some tantric lineages trace their hidden teachings back to Shukracharya, claiming that he passed down mantras and meditative practices meant to awaken the inner fire, the Asuric flame, that transforms ignorance into gnosis, transformation. That is the core of every Asura's legacy. Whether they appear as conquerors or sages, tyrants or visionaries, they always carry within them a spark of evolution. They are never content with what is. They are driven by the hunger for what could be, and that hunger is dangerous. It can build empires, or burn them to the ground. Mahabali, the Asura king who ruled the three worlds, is perhaps the clearest example of this paradox. He was just generous, beloved by his subjects. His reign was marked by peace and prosperity, but he grew too powerful, too independent. The Devas feared him not because he was cruel, but because he was successful. They sent Vishnu in the form of Vamana, who tricked Bali into surrendering his kingdom. But Vishnu did not destroy him. Instead, he granted him rule over the netherworld and immortality of name. In Kerala, Mahabali is celebrated during Onam as a symbol of righteous rule, a demon worshipped as a hero. This contradiction is not a mistake. It is the secret. The Asura does not represent evil. He represents uncontainable potential. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks of Asuric and Devic natures, demonic and divine. But these are not species, they are tendencies within the human soul. The Asuric nature, Krishna says, is marked by pride, ambition, harsh speech and delusion. Yet, he never says it cannot be transformed. In fact, Arjuna himself must face his own Asuric doubts and attachments before he can fulfill his divine purpose. The battle of Kurukshetra is not just between warriors, it is between identities, the old self and the new, the ego and the soul, the Asura and the god within. Ancient temples echo this duality. At the Chidambaram temple, the great dance of Shiva, the Ananda Tandava, takes place upon the body of Apasmara, the dwarf demon of ignorance. But Shiva does not slay him. He presses him down with one foot, holding him in stasis. The message is clear. Ignorance, and by extension the shadow self, is not destroyed. It is integrated, held in balance. Only then can truth dance freely. Even in architecture, we see the presence of the Asura not as an invader, but as a guardian. The Dvarapala, the fearsome gatekeeper statues carved into temple entrances, often bear the features of demons. Bulging eyes, fanged mouths, weapons raised. They are not threats, they are protectors. They keep the unworthy out and challenge the seeker to face their own fear. Only by passing the demon can one enter the divine. There are whispers among tantric mystics that the path of the left hand, Vamachara, was originally a gift from the Asuras. Practices that involve facing death, ego, and illusion directly, embracing the taboo, not to rebel, but to dissolve the limits of perception. These traditions do not shun the Asura, they invoke him. They call upon the energy of Ravana, of Banashura, of Rahu and Ketu, the shadow planets, as forces that reveal deeper truths. In astrology, Rahu and Ketu are seen as disruptors, but also as triggers of awakening. They represent the karmic axis, the lessons the soul must learn by falling before it can rise. Modern scholars have also begun to reinterpret the Asura-Deva conflict as a symbolic battle between cultures. Some theorize that the Asuras may represent older, non-Aryan deities and traditions that were gradually absorbed or suppressed by the Vedic mainstream. In this view, the demonization of the Asuras was not theological, but political, a way to rewrite history through the lens of the victors. But the stories remain, and in them, the truth endures, because the Asura does not vanish. He evolves. In every age, in every psyche, he returns, as the question that cannot be silenced, as the challenge that cannot be ignored. In today's world, the Asura may not wear armor, or wield a mace, but he speaks through revolutionaries, visionaries, artists, scientists, those who disrupt, who defy, who demand that we grow beyond what we've been told to accept. The Asura is the voice that whispers, there is more, keep going, so beware of painting them in black and white. The Asura is not a villain in a child's tale. He is the engine of transformation. He is the fire in the dark, and though that fire may burn, it also illuminates. Without it, the gods would have no need to rise, no purpose to defend, no reason to evolve, because the truth is simple. Without the Asura, there is no story. Before his name became synonymous with villainy, before the flames of Lanka lit the skies with legend, there was Ravana, a figure of immense intellect, mysticism, and power. He was not born in darkness, but carved his path through fire and knowledge. The 10-headed king of Lanka is often remembered for his obsession with Sita, his defiance of Rama, and his eventual downfall. But behind the war cries and burning palaces lies another story, one rarely told, the story of an Asura, who was not merely a demon king, but a philosopher, a devotee, and a scholar of such vast wisdom that even the gods could not ignore his presence. To call Ravana a monster is to look only at the smoke and miss the fire that created it. Ravana was born to a lineage that straddled both divinity and Asuric blood. His father Vishrava was a rishi, a sage of great renown, while his mother Kaikesi belonged to the Rakshasa clan, descendants of the primordial Asuras. This union of ascetic knowledge and dark ambition shaped Ravana into something extraordinary. From a young age, he was consumed by the desire not just for power, but for understanding. He mastered the Vedas and the Upanishads, studied Ayurveda, music, Tantra, and even the occult sciences. Legends say he learned directly from Shiva himself. His 10 heads were not merely symbols of his ego. They represented mastery over 10 branches of knowledge, a mind that could think in 10 directions at once. He was not chaos. He was calculation, discipline, and brilliance personified. It is said that Ravana performed penance so severe, so unwavering, that the very heavens trembled. He stood in still meditation for thousands of years, cutting off his own heads one by one, as an offering to Shiva, and each time they grew back. Pleased by this devotion, Shiva granted him immense boons: invulnerability against gods and demons, the celestial sword Chandras, and knowledge few dared to possess. Ravana became not just a king, but a force of nature. His city Lanka rose like a dream from the sea, a realm of golden towers, lush gardens, and forbidden secrets. It was said that Lanka had no equal on earth or heaven, guarded by warriors, mystics, and magical defenses, created by none other than the architect Vishwakarma himself. But intellect, unchecked, often becomes pride. Ravana began to believe himself invincible, not just in war, but in Dharma. His arrogance grew alongside his empire. He began to rewrite the rules, not out of malice, but out of certainty that he could do better. In some versions of the Ramayana, he even attempts to ascend to the heavens and overthrow Indra. In others, he lifts Mount Kailash, the abode of Shiva, in a fit of pride. Shiva, angered by this display, traps him beneath the mountain. But Ravana, undeterred, composes the Shiva Tandava Stotram, a hymn of such beauty and power that Shiva forgives him. That hymn survives to this day, chanted in temples and ashrams, the work of a so-called demon who praised the very god he once defied. This is the paradox of Ravana, a villain who wrote scripture, a scholar who made war, a devotee who defied the divine. To understand him, one must abandon the comfort of binary thinking. Ravana was not the enemy of righteousness. He was the question it could not answer. His downfall came not from hate, but from desire. When he abducted Sita, wife of Rama, it was not merely an act of lust, it was symbolic defiance. In some interpretations, Ravana believes that Sita is not an ordinary woman, but an incarnation of Lakshmi, whom he once lost in a cosmic past. Others say he was fated to this obsession, cursed by destiny itself. Regardless of the version, he does not violate her. In fact, he places guards to protect her purity, swears not to touch her without consent, and tries to win her through persuasion. But desire, even when restrained, corrupts. It clouded his judgment, fueled his pride, and brought Rama to his gates. The war that followed was not merely a battle of armies, it was a confrontation of philosophies. Rama, the ideal man, upheld Dharma and order. Ravana, the transgressor, embodied passion, intellect, and rebellion. But there are moments, even in war, where Ravana's brilliance shines through. He is said to have been a peerless strategist, capable of shifting the tides of battle through both arms and mind. He commanded beings like Kumbhakarna and Indrajit, warriors of immense power and devotion. Indrajit, his son, mastered dark rituals, even vanquishing celestial beings temporarily. But in the end, destiny does not bend to brilliance alone. When Ravana finally falls, pierced by Rama's arrow, he does not curse his fate. Instead, he accepts it with dignity. In some versions of the story, Rama instructs Lakshmana to sit at Ravana's feet and learn from him. The dying king speaks of politics, time, war, and the fragile dance between power and ethics. His words are not those of a defeated tyrant, but of a philosopher finally free of his obsession. His death is not a punishment, it is a release. The Ramayana itself hints at the cyclical nature of this drama. Ravana is not evil incarnate, he is a role, a mask in the great play of cosmic balance. Some traditions even claim that Ravana was an incarnation of Jaya, one of Vishnu's gatekeepers, cursed to be born as an enemy of the god he once served. This theory suggests that Ravana's rebellion was not born from ego alone, but from divine necessity. He played his part, not with cowardice, but with grandeur. Even today, in parts of India and Sri Lanka, Ravana is not universally reviled. In Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, some communities revere him as a symbol of knowledge and devotion. In Sri Lanka, he is seen by some as a national ancestor, a ruler of wisdom and might. There are temples dedicated to him, festivals that remember not just his fall, but his complexity. The Ravana we are told to hate may only be half the truth. The other half still lives in shadows, in whispers, in verses chanted in his honor. What makes Ravana so compelling is not that he lost, but that he forced the divine to answer a challenge, that he stood before gods and dared to say, "I am not lesser, because I was born Asura." His 10 heads represent not just arrogance, but 10 facets of thought, knowledge, strategy, music, language, ritual, logic, power, memory, philosophy and desire. When he fell, he did not simply die, he scattered his knowledge into the winds, waiting for those with courage to pick it up. Ravana teaches us that intellect is not always noble, and ambition is not always evil, that a brilliant mind can destroy, and yet still illuminate, that devotion can live in the heart of a rebel, and that sometimes, the darkest figure in the story is not a demon, but a mirror. So the next time you hear his name, don't picture only a towering Rakshasa with a golden crown and a wicked laugh. Picture a man on a mountaintop, chanting hymns to Shiva, writing treatises on medicine and music, ruling a kingdom built on gold and willpower. Picture a mind too vast to be contained, a soul too complex for simple judgment. Ravana was not a lesson in evil, he was a lesson in the cost of brilliance without humility, of love without surrender, of intellect without balance. Because the most dangerous demon is not the one who rages in darkness, it's the one who burns too brightly, who dares to think beyond the limits of gods, and whose fall is so spectacular, the world remembers it not with condemnation, but awe. Long before kingdoms rose and fell, before the gods carved their places in the heavens, there was a name that made even the immortals tremble. Hiranyakashipu. He was not a demon, in the way we often imagine. He was not a monster born in rage or mindless cruelty. He was a seeker, a visionary, a ruler, and like all seekers who go too far, his journey began with an obsession, the hunger to conquer death itself. This is not just a story of battle, it is a story of temptation, of hubris, of divine loopholes, and the terrifying cost of becoming more than mortal. And at the center of it all, a lion-faced god, waiting in the shadows between worlds. Hiranyakashipu was a Daitya, a member of the mighty clan born of the union between the sage Kashyapa and the fierce matriarch Diti. His brother, Hiranyaksha, had already carved his name into legend by dragging the earth itself into the cosmic ocean, forcing Vishnu to incarnate as a wild boar, Varaha, and slay him in battle. Hiranyakashipu watched his brother fall, not as a moment of defeat, but as a call to war. A war not waged on battlefields alone, but against the very fabric of cosmic law. His vengeance was not blind rage. It was cold, calculating, absolute. He would not merely fight the gods, he would transcend them. And so he began his penance. Austerities so severe that the winds held their breath. He stood still in the wilderness, arms raised above his head, body consumed by ants and fire, meditating for thousands of years. His bones glowed like molten gold, his willpower shaking the pillars of heaven. Finally, Brahma, the creator, appeared before him. No god could ignore such relentless determination. Hiranyakashipu asked not for wealth, not for glory, but for protection. Specifically worded, deliberately constructed, he made a request that twisted logic itself, that he could not be killed by man or beast, inside or outside, during day or night, by any weapon, on earth, or in the sky. Brahma granted it. And with those words, the demon king believed himself invincible. He returned to his kingdom, not as a mortal, but as a god among men. He overthrew Indra, took the throne of the three worlds, and declared himself supreme. Temples were erected in his honor, priests chanted his name, and the devas, powerless against his boon, fled into shadows, waiting for something to break the seal of his arrogance. But Hiranyakashipu did not rule through cruelty alone. He was a philosopher king, a strategist, a master of the scriptures. In some texts, he is described as a wise and charismatic ruler, one who genuinely believed the gods had lied to humanity, manipulating them through fear. He saw himself not as a tyrant, but as a liberator. In his eyes, devotion to Vishnu was ignorance, and he would cleanse the world of it. But then came the fracture in his design. A child, his own son, Prahlada. From the moment Prahlada could speak, he chanted the name of Vishnu, not from rebellion, but from love. His devotion was pure, effortless, and unshakable. No amount of persuasion or punishment could silence it. Hiranyakashipu, furious and bewildered, tried everything. He sent his son to be re-educated by tutors loyal to his own beliefs, but Prahlada returned each time, smiling, repeating his mantras. Hiranyakashipu threw him into fire, into snake pits, beneath stampeding elephants. Nothing worked. Some say it was not just divine protection that shielded the boy, it was his absolute surrender to the divine. A child who knew no fear, because he had already given everything to the divine presence that moved unseen through the world. It wasn't long before the king lost all patience. In his grand palace, surrounded by gold and thunder, Hiranyakashipu brought Prahlada before him one final time. He asked, "Where is your god now? Is he in this pillar?" Prahlada only smiled. "He is everywhere." With that, Hiranyakashipu struck the pillar with his mace, and it cracked. What emerged was not a man, not a beast, but something impossible. Narasimha, the half-man, half-lion avatar of Vishnu, tore through reality like a scream in a silent room. Neither human nor animal, neither gentle nor monstrous, he embodied the paradox. He was the answer to every condition Hiranyakashipu had tried to bend. It was twilight, neither day nor night. They stood on a threshold, neither indoors nor outdoors. The demon was lifted not to the ground, nor the sky, but onto Narasimha's lap, and the god's claws, not weapons, tore into the king's flesh, ripping him apart with a roar that shattered illusion itself. The gods looked on in awe and horror. Narasimha did not stop. He raged, eyes burning with cosmic fire, claws soaked in divine blood. Even after Hiranyakashipu was dead, the avatar continued, his fury undimmed. It was only when the child Prahlada approached him, laid his small hand upon the lion's foot, and whispered prayers of peace, that the storm calmed. Narasimha, soothed by the purity of the boy's heart, vanished into the air like a myth folding into itself. But what truly died that day? Hiranyakashipu, is not remembered as a fool. He is remembered as a symbol, the eternal seeker who tried to outwit death through cleverness rather than surrender. His story is not one of madness, but of brilliance pushed too far. His boon was a master stroke of logic, and yet it failed, not because he miscalculated, but because reality itself cannot be tricked. The divine, in Hindu cosmology, is not bound by words or rules. It listens to intention, to the silent truth beneath the petition, and when that truth is corrupted by ego, the form it takes in response is always unexpected. In later texts, Hiranyakashipu is understood as one of the gatekeepers of Vishnu, Jaya, cursed to be reborn as his enemy. It was a cosmic play, destined to end in blood, devotion, and revelation. The king was not punished, he was fulfilling a role, and Prahlada, the boy saint, becomes the prototype of the perfect devotee. His story is told to children, painted on temple walls, and chanted in bhajans across centuries. Yet few stop to ask, would Prahlada's light have meant anything without the darkness of his father? The temples of India remember. In South India, there are shrines dedicated not just to Narasimha, but to Hiranyakashipu himself. Sculptures show the exact moment of his death, the frozen scream, the lion's claws, the boy watching in silence. Some even meditate on that image, because within it is a truth too deep for language, that the pursuit of immortality, without humility, leads not to godhood, but to annihilation. And yet, Hiranyakashipu lives, not in body, but in every mind that seeks to cheat death, in every scientist searching for eternal youth, in every king who refuses to give up power, in every soul terrified of surrendering control. He is not a relic of myth, he is a mirror. We all build our own boons, our conditions, our rationalizations, our illusions of safety, and we all fear the moment they are tested. Narasimha does not come to punish, he comes to reveal. He is the moment when the soul realizes it is not the master, when logic cracks like a pillar, and something ancient emerges, not to destroy, but to reset. Hiranyakashipu's death is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of remembrance, that the divine is not a system to be gained, it is a mystery to be honored. And so the story continues, whispered through centuries, the king who could not die, the god who could not be defined, the child who could not be corrupted. Together, they form a trinity more terrifying than any demon: power, faith, and the unknown. So the next time you hear the story of Hiranyakashipu, listen not for the thunder of battle, but for the silence between, the moment of twilight, the place where doors open both ways, because that's where Narasimha waits, still, and that's where we all stand, eventually, between rules and reality, between pride and surrender, between death and something else. In the time before memory, when gods faltered, and darkness spread across the heavens, there emerged a force so relentless, so defiant, that even the immortals trembled. His name was Mahishasura, the buffalo demon, the shapeshifter, the conqueror of the celestial realm. He was not born in shadow, but forged in ambition, rising from forgotten lineages, driven by the desire to reverse the balance of power between gods and demons. Mahishasura's victory over the Devas was not a mere fluke of strength. It was the result of strategy, cunning, and a boon that made him impervious to all male beings. No god, no warrior, no celestial force born of man could destroy him. And so, as their palaces fell and their weapons shattered, the gods realized a truth far more terrifying than defeat, that their enemy was untouchable by everything they knew. Desperate and humiliated, the gods turned to the unthinkable. They pooled their energies, the heat of Shiva, the fury of Vishnu, the precision of Indra, and the will of countless others, and from that divine convergence arose something new. Not a god, not a weapon, but a goddess, Durga, a being of perfect clarity and terrifying grace. She did not come with flames or thunder, but with purpose, eyes glowing with the light of 10,000 suns. She was born not in response to fear, but as the embodiment of balance, the answer to chaos, the womb of justice, the feminine not as nurture, but as retribution. Der is Sergenyu, wit of Jasad, der is Spirchen. When Mahishasura first heard of her, he laughed. A woman, sent by the gods to reclaim their broken thrones. He sent armies, asuras clad in steel and arrogance. She stood alone, mounted on a lion, and did not move. When they approached, she did not flinch. When they attacked, she did not falter. Her weapons, gifted by every god, moved with an elegance that belied their lethality. A chakra from Vishnu, a trident from Shiva, a thunderbolt from Indra, and a bow from Vayu. But her true weapon was not steel, it was stillness. The stillness of someone who does not seek victory, but simply restores what is broken. The battle lasted 9 nights and 10 days. Each day, Mahishasura changed form, from a buffalo to a lion, to a man, to an elephant, to a serpent, to things without name, bending the laws of nature itself to avoid death. Each night, Durga met him not with hatred, but with unwavering truth. She danced, she laughed, she bled, but she never lost herself. On the final day, when Mahishasura, in his monstrous buffalo form, charged toward her in one last desperate act of defiance, she leapt from her lion, pressed her foot to his chest, and drove her trident through his heart. The scream that followed did not echo, it was swallowed by the silence that returns when balance is restored. But who was Mahishasura, truly? His name means buffalo demon, yet the symbolism is deeper. The buffalo is a creature of stubbornness, inertia, primal instinct. Mahishasura was not just a shapeshifter in body, but in ideology. He represented the ego's resistance to change, a force that refuses to be tamed by order. In some texts, he is described as a noble being corrupted by ambition, once a seeker who sought immortality through penance and discipline. His boon, like many asuras before him, came from years of severe austerities. Brahma granted him the condition that no man could kill him. It was not arrogance that doomed him, it was certainty. He had accounted for everything, except her. Durga was the loophole, not because she was lesser, but because she was beyond his imagination. She was not an exception, she was the origin. In the Deva Mahatmya, the scripture that chronicles this tale, the goddess is described as Mahania, the great illusion, but also Mahadevi, the great reality. She is both the veil and the truth. She creates the battlefield and then ends it. Durga's fight with Mahishasura is not just a cosmic war, it is an inner war, one fought in every human soul, between clarity and delusion, between stillness and impulse, between feminine grace and masculine chaos. The 9 nights of battle are now celebrated as Navaratri, a festival of worship, discipline, and remembrance. Each night is dedicated to a different form of the goddess, from the fierce Kali to the nurturing Annapurna, symbolizing the multifaceted nature of feminine power. On the 10th day, Vijayadashami, victory is celebrated, but the victory is not of one side over another. It is the victory of consciousness over ego, of harmony over force. The figure of Durga is not gentle in this context. She is the storm that ends stagnation. Her image, often shown with 10 arms, represents the multiplicity of divine powers within a single form. Her lion is not a pet, it is her own primal nature, tamed and directed. She does not suppress the animal within, she rides it. Mahishasura's defeat is commemorated every year, but in Mysore, something strange happens. There, during Dasara, he is not merely hated, he is acknowledged. Statues of Mahishasura are erected. Stories are told, not just of his fall, but of his strength. Some local traditions even claim he was once a ruler of great wisdom, a misunderstood king who fought for dignity and lost to divine politics. This duality, the celebration of both warrior and goddess, reflects something profound, that even demons have a place in the cycle of creation, that even destruction has roots in longing, that what we call evil may, at its heart, be the refusal to surrender. Durga does not slay Mahishasura out of wrath. She slays him because the time has come. Her actions are not emotional, they are inevitable, and that is why she is feared, not because she is wild, but because she is just. The myth of Mahishasura and Durga also echoes psychological truths. In the language of archetypes, Mahishasura represents the unchecked masculine shadow, the part of us that believes force, strategy, and dominance can solve every problem. Durga, by contrast, is the awakened feminine, not submissive, but transcendent. She does not fight him to prove herself. She fights him because he refuses to see her, and in that blindness, he seals his fate. In tantric traditions, the slaying of Mahishasura is not seen as the killing of a monster, but the dissolving of illusion. The buffalo within, heavy, stubborn, grounded in materialism, must be sacrificed on the altar of awakening. Only then can the goddess rise in full glory. Her blade is awareness, her lion is will, her dance is liberation. Even in modern times, Durga's image remains one of the most powerful in Indian iconography. She is invoked by activists, mothers, spiritual seekers, and artists alike. She embodies the strength that does not shout, the clarity that cuts without cruelty, the love that protects by destroying what must no longer be. And Mahishasura, he is the part of us that resists that clarity, the voice that says, I have calculated every possibility, I cannot fall, and yet we do, always. When we forget the goddess waits outside our logic, her eyes already open. Durga's power is not simply divine, it is deeply human. She is the reminder that creation is not soft, it is ferocious, that the womb does not only birth, it protects, it destroys, it decides. Mahishasura's story is not just about defeat, it is about what happens when we refuse to yield to the part of ourselves that knows better, the part that already understands when it is time to let go. So the next time you see her image, 10-armed, lion-mounted, sword raised, don't just see a goddess, see yourself, see the part of you that rises when everything falls, the part that doesn't scream, or beg, or panic, but simply moves forward, quiet, fierce, unapologetic, because sometimes, the most powerful thing in the universe is not the demon who conquers the gods, it's the woman who walks into his throne room alone and doesn't ask permission to end it. In the heart of Hindu cosmology, time is not a line, it is a circle. There is no beginning, no ultimate end, only a spiraling movement through cycles of creation, preservation, and dissolution. This understanding of time changes everything. It reshapes how we view gods, mortals, and especially demons, because in a linear world, demons are vanquished once and for all, but in a cyclical world, they return, again and again, not always in the same form, not always with the same name, but always when the world forgets what it once knew. The return is not an error in the system, it is the system, an eternal rhythm, the cosmic dance of light and shadow, order and chaos, life and decay. Not a war to be won, but a balance to be maintained through struggle. This concept is ancient, and it runs deep. Hindu scriptures describe vast stretches of time called yugas, world ages, each with its own rules, rulers, and realities. We live now in the Kali Yuga, the last and darkest of the four ages. It is a time when virtue fades, truth becomes slippery, and chaos grows louder. So before this age came Dvapara, and before that Treta, and at the dawn, Satya Yuga, the age of truth, where gods walked among men, and the shadows were fewer. Each yuga ends with a reset, a great dissolution called pralaya, when the universe folds in on itself, only to be reborn. And in every age, demons return. They are not anomalies, they are necessary. Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Mahishasura. They are not isolated figures, lost to myth. They are echoes of a deeper archetype. The challenger, the one who rises when harmony becomes stagnation, the one who dares to push against divine comfort, and when they are defeated, it is never final. Their energy re-emerges elsewhere, sometimes in new myths, sometimes in new minds, and sometimes in us. Even the gods are not immune to this cycle. Vishnu, the great preserver, takes 10 forms across the ages, the Dashavatara, each designed to meet a new form of darkness. From the fish Matsya, who saves life from a great flood, to the final avatar, yet to come, Kalki, the rider of the apocalypse, who will bring about the end of Kali Yuga. Each time, the god descends not to destroy evil forever, but to restore balance, knowing full well that it will unravel again. That is the sacred tragedy of the cosmic order. It is always falling apart, and always being restored. The Mahabharata, that vast ocean of myth, history, and metaphysics, is a perfect example. It is not just a war between families. It is the collapse of a world age. The Devas and Asuras are reborn as mortals. Arjuna and Karna, Bhima and Duryodhana, and through them, ancient karmas are played out again. Even Krishna, the divine avatar, stands in the middle of it all, not as a savior, but as a charioteer, guiding without forcing. His Bhagavad Gita does not promise victory, only clarity, because the war is not about winning, it is about seeing, clearly, painfully, honestly. And then, there is the story of Bali, not the island, but the Asura king Mahabali. In the Treta Yuga, he ruled with such fairness and prosperity that the gods grew afraid, not of his tyranny, but of his excellence. Vishnu, taking the form of a dwarf, Vamana, tricked him into surrendering his kingdom, and yet, he was granted a place of honor in the netherworld, and a promise that he would return again. In Kerala, during the festival of Onam, people still welcome him home, lighting lamps and preparing feasts. A demon king, remembered not as evil, but as just. Why? Because in the cyclical view, yesterday's villain may become tomorrow's savior. The roles change, the essence remains. The Puranas, ancient Hindu texts rich with cosmological timelines, speak of Manvantaras, cycles within cycles, ruled by beings called Manas. Each Manvantara hosts its own set of Devas and Asuras, its own avatars, its own wars and revelations. In these layers, demons do not disappear, they evolve. Shumba and Nishumba, the twin Asuras who challenged the goddess in another cycle, re-emerged from the shadows of their ancestors. In some versions, even Rahu and Ketu, the dismembered Asuras who tried to drink the nectar of immortality, now live eternally, as shadow planets, influencing human fate through eclipses. They were not destroyed, they were transformed. This idea is not just theological, it is psychological. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, once wrote that all myths are mirrors of the human mind. In Hindu thought, demons are not just external enemies, they are internal truths. Ravana is pride. Hiranyakashipu is the refusal to surrender. Mahishasura's unchecked desire. And they return because we return to them. Every time we cling to ego, every time we lose sight of balance, the Asura wakes again, not in the sky, but behind our eyes. And yet, this is not a hopeless cycle. It is sacred, because with each fall there is a chance to rise differently. That is the secret the West often misses when looking at Hindu demonology. These are not morality tales of good defeating evil. These are initiation stories, myths of descent, struggle, and transformation. The Asura is not something to be erased. He is something to be faced. To fight the demon is not to purify the world, it is to awaken the self. In tantric traditions, the cyclical nature of conflict is embraced. practitioners do not try to banish darkness. They invoke it, face it, integrate it. Kali, the black-skinned goddess of time, dances on the corpse of Shiva, not because she is evil, but because she is time itself, devouring all illusions of permanence. Her necklace of skulls is not grotesque. It is memory. She reminds us that every creation must pass through destruction to be real. The demon she slays is not some foreign threat. It is the false self, the ego, the illusion of control. And yet, she smiles. Even the idea of moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth, does not negate the cycle, it transcends it. The soul, when fully awakened, does not escape the dance. It becomes the dancer. This understanding of time and conflict is reflected in Indian art and architecture. Temple carvings often depict gods and demons locked in endless combat, not in isolated panels, but woven into mandalas and cosmic wheels. The churning of the ocean, the Samudra Manthan, is a perfect example. Gods and demons cooperate to churn the ocean of milk, seeking the nectar of immortality. They are not enemies. They are opposites in collaboration. And when the nectar emerges, it is not given to one side. It is contested, stolen, guarded, and ultimately distributed as destiny sees fit. There is no final victory in this worldview. Only awareness, only rhythm, only return. Today we still see the echoes. We celebrate Durga's victory every year, during Navaratri. But we also remember Mahishasura. We honor Rama's triumph in Diwali. But we also light the darkness within ourselves. We chant the mantras of Narasimha, not to destroy a demon, but to protect ourselves from becoming one. Because the demon, like the god, never dies. He waits for a crack in the order, for a lapse in vigilance, for the moment when balance tips, and that is when the story begins again. So remember this, the war is not over. It was never meant to be. The Asuras have not left us. They walk beside us, inside us, around us. But so do the gods, and in every moment of fear, pride, anger, or longing, the battlefield returns, not with spears and chariots, but with choices. The real question is not when the next demon will rise. It is whether we will recognize them, and ourselves, when they do. Because in this dance of light and shadow, there are no final victories, only eternal awakenings.
They do not march with armies. They do not raise banners or seek thrones. Rakshas do not conquer. They consume. While devas rule by light and asuras challenge from the shadows, Rakshas stalk through the darkness between breaths, waiting, watching, hungering. These are not the grand warriors of cosmic conflict. They are the whisper beneath your bed, the cold breath on your neck when you're alone at night, the eyes in the forest that never blink. They are predators, flesh-eaters, masters of illusion, and once you see them, it's already too late. In the vast labyrinth of Hindu mythology, Rakshas hold a unique place. They are not divine rebels like Asuras, nor elemental forces like Daitiyas or Danavas. They are the corruption of hunger, spiritual, physical, and psychological. According to the ancient texts, the Rakshas were born from Brahma's own body when he fell asleep during creation. In his slumber, his darker thoughts took shape, and those thoughts demanded to eat. Thus were born the Rakshasas, beings whose very first act was to devour. Alarmed, Brahma banished them to the edges of the world. But what is banished does not disappear. It waits and feeds. They are shapeshifters, illusionists, creatures of twilight and smoke. Unlike the noble Asura kings, Rakshas rarely build kingdoms. Their domain is the fringes, the forest, the cremation ground, the dream. They do not strike from strength, but from vulnerability. The ancient epic Ramayana is filled with their presence. Surpanaka, the Rakshasi sister of Rama, seduces Rama with false beauty, only to be humiliated and mutilated when her trick is exposed. Kara and Dushana, her brothers, lead armies of Rakshasas against Rama, fighting not for empire, but for vengeance and bloodlust. And then there is the infamous Tataka, once a beautiful woman, cursed into monstrosity, who haunts the forest like a living curse, devouring all who wander too far from the path. But the most famous Rakshasa of all is Rama himself, though he transcends the label. Ravana was more than Rakshasa. He was a scholar, a king, an enigma. Yet his blood tied him to the same lineage, and his kin, the countless Rakshas who fought and died in Lanka, served not out of duty, but hunger. Their powers varied. Some could fly, some could disappear, others could enter dreams or possess corpses, but all shared the same insatiable appetite for flesh, for fear, for the unraveling of human will. It is said that Rakshas do not simply eat the body, they eat the mind. They seduce their victims with voices of loved ones, with dreams of desire, with illusions so perfect, they collapse only in death. They are often associated with the night, when the veil is thinnest, when the human mind is most open to suggestion. In ancient India, it was believed that traveling at night through the forest was an invitation to death, not from tigers or snakes, but from Rakshasas. Their howls were mistaken for wind, their claws for branches, and their eyes could glow like embers in the dark, or vanish completely. Real rituals existed to protect against them. In the Atharva Veda, one of the oldest texts of mystical incantations, there are mantras specifically aimed at repelling Rakshasas, not with weapons, but with words, chants of light, offerings of ash and fire. Because a Rakshasa cannot be slain in the usual way, kill it, and it may return in another form. Trick it, and it may simply trick you back. The only real defense is purity, of thought, of heart, of space. In some traditions, Rakshasas are even said to possess the bodies of the dead, inhabiting corpses left uncremated, especially those of violent or sudden deaths. These possessed forms are called pretas, not quite Rakshas, not quite ghosts, but something far worse, wandering spirits, who hunger not for food, but for attention, for obsession, for madness. It's believed that such beings can whisper into the ears of the living, planting thoughts that feel like your own, thoughts of jealousy, violence, despair. The moment you think, I would never do that, the Rakshasa smiles. But not all Rakshasas are mindless beasts. Some, like Vivashana, the brother of Rama, broke from their kind. Vivashana joined Rama, rejecting his brother's path, and was rewarded with the kingdom of Lanka. After the war, this suggests something deeper, that even among the devourers, there is choice. A Rakshasa is not merely a species, it is a state, a hunger, and hunger, in Hindu thought, is both a curse and a teacher. There are stories of sages becoming Rakshasas through anger, of warriors consumed by pride, turning into monsters. In this way, Rakshasas are not born, they are revealed. They are what happens when the soul is consumed by desire, so intense it burns through the boundaries of the self. That's why they are so terrifying, because their shape is familiar, because their path is possible. In modern interpretations, some scholars have argued that the Rakshas represent the fear of the other, tribes and peoples who lived outside the Vedic fold, whose rituals and customs seemed strange and threatening. The forest-dwelling peoples, the ones who worshipped different gods, who lived close to death and decay, they became Rakshasas in the stories of the plains. This does not lessen the myth, it deepens it, because myth is not just fantasy. It is how cultures negotiate danger, how they draw lines between self and stranger, light and dark, the known and the unknown. And yet, even now, the Rakshasa persists, not in the forest, but in the mirror, the one who lies, who manipulates, who devours attention, kindness, time, the boss who preys on fear, the lover who twists affection into control, the voice inside you that tells you you're nothing without more status, more money, more flesh. That voice is old. It predates your body. It whispers in the same tone that once lured kings into madness and turned sages into beasts. The Rakshasa is not just a monster. It is a reminder that we all carry hungers, that we all wear masks, that beneath the surface of every civilization, every ritual, every prayer, there is the possibility of slipping, just for a moment, into the night, and that the line between protector and predator is thinner than we think. This is why, in some tantric paths, the Rakshasa is not feared. It is invoked, faced, transformed. These mystics do not avoid the forest. They go into it. They chant in cremation grounds. They meditate in the places others avoid, because they know the truth. The Rakshasa is not the end. It is the threshold. So light your fire, draw your circle, speak your mantra, but do not pretend they're gone. They are never gone. They're just waiting, and they are hungry.
What if the most terrifying thing in the dark isn't what you see, but what you believe you're seeing? In Hindu cosmology, there exists a force so subtle, so dangerous, that even gods tread carefully in its presence. It's not a demon, nor a weapon, nor a curse. It is Maya, illusion, a power not to destroy the body, but to unravel the mind. And nowhere is Maya more deadly than in the hands of the Rakshas. The Rakshas do not just eat flesh, they distort reality. Unlike other demonic beings who conquer through force, Rakshas are artists of deception. They do not come at you head on. They come as your friend, as your lover, as your child, as the thing you most want or most fear, and they only reveal their true form when it's far too late. Their hunger is not just for blood, it is for belief. They consume your perception, and once they do, they no longer need to kill you. You will destroy yourself. In Sanskrit, the word Maya means illusion, enchantment, the veil that obscures the truth. But it is not merely a trick. Maya is woven into the fabric of existence itself. According to the Upanishads, the entire material world is Maya, an ever-shifting dream, hiding the eternal reality of Brahman. For the enlightened, Maya is a lesson, but for the unprepared, it is a trap. Rakshas have mastered this trap. In ancient epics like the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they wield Maya like a weapon. They do not build illusions with smoke and mirrors. They shape entire realities. A battlefield becomes a paradise. A monster becomes a monk. A scream becomes a lullaby. These are not hallucinations. They are manufactured perceptions so convincing that even sages have fallen prey. And once the illusion takes root in your mind, it feeds on your faith. It grows stronger with every moment you believe it's real. There is the tale of Maricha, a Rakshasa sent by Ravana to lure Rama into the forest. Maricha took the form of a golden deer, beautiful, otherworldly, glowing like a living jewel. Sita, enchanted by the creature's grace, begged Rama to capture it. Rama, unaware, pursued the illusion deep into the forest. But when he was far enough away, the deer dropped its mask. Its voice twisted into Rama's cry for help, calling Sita into panic. That illusion, crafted with care, deployed with timing, set in motion the entire war of Lanka. One illusion, and the world caught fire. Then there is the story of Hidimba, a Rakshasa who appeared to Bhima during his exile. She came not as a monster, but as a beautiful woman. She claimed to have rejected her own blood for the sake of love, and she may have meant it. That's the brilliance and terror of Maya. Even the illusion may not know it's false. Bhima accepted her, and she bore him a son, Ghatotkacha, who would later become a warrior of great power. But even then, the question lingers, was it love?
or just another layer of the dream. Rakshas can impersonate the dead. They can appear in your sleep. They can stand beside you, mimicking the breath and scent of someone you trust, until the moment their eyes flash, their mouths twist, and you realize you've been speaking to a shadow. Some texts speak of Rakshas taking the forms of priests to desecrate rituals, or appearing as wandering sages to mislead travelers. Maya does not need grand illusions. It only needs one believable lie. But why do they do it? In Vedic psychology, every being seeks bhoga, experience. For devas, it's the bliss of divine order. For humans, it's the struggle through karma. But for Rakshas, it's sensation, raw, intense, unfiltered, and the most potent sensation is fear. When a victim realizes they've been deceived, when trust collapses and reality cracks, that moment of terror is food. A soul unraveling is more nourishing than flesh. The illusion is the hunt. The panic is the feast. Modern readers often compare Rakshasa illusions to psychological manipulation, and they're not wrong. The ancient stories mirror what we now understand in neurology and trauma psychology. That perception shapes reality. That trauma can alter memory. That fear, planted carefully, can erode a person's sense of self. Rakshas are not monsters in the woods. They are metaphors for gaslighting, for betrayal, for self-deception. When your mind turns against you, when you no longer know what to trust, who do you become? In the Mahabharata, Maya is not just the Rakshasa's tool. It becomes a battlefield itself. The palace of illusions, built by the Asura architect Mayadanava for the Pandavas, is a structure so perfectly deceptive that Duryodhana, upon visiting, falls into a pool he thinks is a polished floor. Humiliated, his anger ignites the chain of events leading to the Great War. One illusion, one moment, and generations are burned by its fire. But illusion is not always demonic. The gods too use Maya. Vishnu's avatars often cloak themselves in humble forms. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, "By my may, I am not revealed to all." Maya in divine hands becomes Leela, a sacred play. But when used by Rakshasas, it is not play, it is predation. Still, the line is thin. Some tantric texts suggest that Maya is neither good nor evil. It simply reveals. If you see through it, you awaken. If you fall into it, you descend. The Rakshasa, then, is not just an enemy. It is a test. Can you see clearly, or will you choose the comforting lie? Rituals to protect against Maya involve more than fire and chant. They demand inner clarity. Yogic traditions emphasize the cultivation of viveka, discernment, the ability to separate real from unreal, to know when the golden deer is just gold, though to recognize when the voice in your head is not your own. In this way, the ancient stories become more than myth. They become survival manuals. In regions of India, it is still believed that traveling alone at night, especially after certain rites or during eclipses, makes one vulnerable to Mayajala, the net of illusion. Elders advise the wearing of specific amulets, the avoidance of strange voices calling from the dark, and never following a loved one seen in a place they should not be. Because if you do, if you follow them, you may never return. Even today, in spiritual communities, practitioners speak of chitta-bhranti, distortion of the mind, where visions during meditation may be beautiful, but false. The Rakshasa does not need a physical body to deceive. It only needs your attention, and the moment you chase the image, it owns you. But not all is hopeless. There is a reason Rakshasa illusions fail when faced with purity. In the Ramayana, Sita's unwavering faith pierces Ravana's traps. In the Mahabharata, Krishna's wisdom slices through Duryodhana's fantasies. Clarity is the sword, awareness is the fire. A mind that sees is a fortress no demon can breach. Yet we must remember, Maya is not out there. It is everywhere. In the media we consume, in the narratives we build, in the roles we play. We are surrounded by illusions, wrapped in them, and sometimes we are the ones who craft them. The Rakshasa does not always come in the night. Sometimes it comes in the morning, as the voice that tells you you're not enough, as the story that says comfort matters more than truth. So ask yourself, what is the golden deer you still chase? What voice calls to you sounding like love, but leads into the forest? And if the illusion is perfect, how would you ever know? The art of Maya is not to make you believe something false. It is to make you need it to be true. And once you do, the illusion becomes your home, your world, your cage. The Rakshasas know this, and they're watching.
There are demons born from chaos, and then there are demons made, shaped by curses, injustice, and divine neglect. Among them, none are more haunting than Tathaka and Kumbhakarna, two monstrous beings whose stories lie not only in bloodshed, but in the tragedy of transformation. These are not tales of evil in its purest form, but of power misunderstood, misused, and ultimately bound by fate. One a woman turned into a beast by rage, the other a titan chained by sleep, both cursed, both feared, and both more than they seemed. Tathaka was not always a monster. Before she was the shrieking demoness who haunted the Dandaka forest, she was a noble woman, born of Yaksha lineage, the daughter of the mighty Suketu. She was powerful, beautiful, and married to Sunda, a formidable asura. Her life was touched by divine energy, but also shadowed by ambition. When her husband was slain by the sage Agastya for committing terrible acts, Tathaka's grief turned to vengeance. In fury, she attacked the sage, and in doing so, sealed her fate. Agastya cursed her, not with death, but with transformation. Her body grew grotesque, her mind unraveled, and her hunger turned feral. She became a Rakshasi, a flesh-eater, doomed to wander the forest, her scream echoing through trees, her touch withering life itself. But Tathaka's curse was more than physical. It was a loss of identity. Stripped of memory, of self, of womanhood, she became a myth in her own lifetime. The monster in the trees, the mother of demons, a name whispered to frighten children, and yet she was still a mother. Her sons Subaho and Maricha also became Rakshasas, spreading terror through sacrificial rituals and disrupting the spiritual equilibrium of the land. For years Tathaka ruled her forest in madness, but she was not forgotten. Her story reaches its climax in the Ramayana, when the sage Vishvamitra calls upon Rama, still a prince, to protect his rituals. Rama, though hesitant to raise arms against a woman, is instructed by the sage to kill her without mercy, for Dharma, the cosmic order, must be preserved. And so, in the shadows of dawn, arrows fly, and Tathaka falls, not as a demoness screaming in rage, but as a tragic figure, the symbol of what happens when divine power punishes instead of heals. Her death is necessary, but it is not righteous. It is a warning. Even monsters were once people. Then there is Kumbhakarna, towering, slumbering, colossal, the brother of Rama, and one of the strangest beings in all Hindu mythology. He was born of the same parents, Kaikisi and sage Vishrava, and from the beginning, his fate was entangled with paradox. Kumbhakarna was no fool. In fact, he was said to be extraordinarily wise, a master of debate, theology, and warfare. He was as devoted to Dharma as he was to his family, and his strength was legendary. But like all beings of great potential, he was undone by his own desire. When the gods saw his growing power, they feared he would upset the balance. So when Kumbhakarna performed penance to request a boon from Brahma, Indra and the other devas intervened. They manipulated his tongue through the power of Saraswati, the goddess of speech, and made him ask, not for Indrasana, the throne of Indra, but for Nidrasana, the throne of sleep. Thus his gift became a curse. Kumbhakarna would sleep for 6 months at a time, and when he awoke,
he would be ravenous, needing to consume vast amounts of food or flesh before collapsing again into darkness. Yet he remained loyal to Ravana. When the war with Rama came, and Lanka trembled under siege, it was Kumbhakarna who was called. Woken from his unnatural sleep, he did not leap into battle with bloodlust. He questioned. He warned Ravana that abducting Sita was foolish, that pride would be his undoing. But when his brother refused to yield, Kumbhakarna accepted his duty. He marched into battle, not as a villain, but as a brother, a soldier, and a titan. His steps shook the earth. His roars split the sky. Even the gods paused. It took an entire army, a rain of arrows, and finally, divine weapons from Rama himself to bring him down. Kumbhakarna died on the battlefield, not howling like a beast, but dignified, defiant, and eerily serene. His body, they say, stood upright for several moments, even after death, as if refusing to fall, as if even in death, sleep had not claimed him. But Kumbhakarna's symbolism runs deeper. He is the embodiment of tamas, inertia, sleep, unconsciousness, one of the three gunas, or qualities of nature, while Ravana represents rajas, passion and desire. Kumbhakarna is the heavy veil of ignorance, the weight of the unawakened soul. Yet he is not evil. Tamas is not wicked. It is necessary. We all sleep. We all need rest. But when sleep becomes life, when awakening becomes unnatural, when clarity is drowned in weight, the soul withers. His story mirrors our own. How often do we sleep through our lives, spiritually numb, intellectually passive, emotionally dulled? Kumbhakarna reminds us that great power, left unused, decays into lethargy, and when it is finally forced to rise, it may do so in violence, not out of malice, but out of sheer disorientation. The world he woke to was not the one he had left, and so he roared, because it was all he could do. Both Tathaka and Kumbhakarna are monsters, but they are not monstrous. One was cursed for vengeance, the other trapped by fate. Both are tragic mirrors of human potential, how it can be twisted, delayed, or denied. Tathaka shows us what happens when rage is left to rot. Kumbhakarna shows us what happens when awareness is put to sleep. In some lesser-known tellings, Tathaka's spirit does not vanish after death. It lingers in the Dandaka forest, not seeking revenge, but whispering warnings to those who stray too far. And Kumbhakarna, in certain tantric visions, is not damned but revered, as a guardian of the liminal space between consciousness and dream. In sleep, it is said, we pass into other worlds, and who better to guard that gate than the sleeper who once shook heaven? These stories endure not because they entertain, but because they awaken something primal. We know what it is to lose control, to become what others fear, to wake up in a world we no longer recognize. That is the Rakshasa's truth, not that they exist, but that they reflect what already lives inside us. So the next time you hear the wind scream through trees, think of Tathaka, not as a beast, but as a mother who lost too much. And the next time sleep feels heavier than it should, think of Kumbhakarna, not as a brute, but as a soul who woke too late. Because demons, like dreams, are not always what they seem, and in the forest between sleep and sorrow, they still walk.
He was born into the house of demons, among howls and hunger, shadow and pride. His blood was that of Rakshas, his lineage steeped in power and ancient fury. His brother was Ravana, the demon king of Lanka, ruler of 10 heads and countless legions. His kin were known across the 3 worlds for terror and tyranny, and yet Vibhishana walked a different path, a path few dared to tread, one of truth, of dharma, of light. Vibhishana's story is not the tale of a saint born pure. It is the tale of a soul that refused to surrender to its surroundings. In the halls of Ravana's court, where arrogance passed for wisdom and cruelty was masked as strength, Vibhishana remained still, watchful, questioning. He was not weak, he was not afraid, but he saw what others did not, that righteousness
even in the heart of darkness, is the only power that endures. He listened while others roared, he advised while others schemed, and when the moment came, he chose the unthinkable, he chose to leave. But before the betrayal, before the break, Vibhishana tried. He warned Ravana again and again. When Sita was brought to Lanka, when the skies darkened with omens, when sages cursed the kingdom from afar, Vibhishana stood before his brother, not as an enemy, but as a voice of reason. He reminded Ravana of the laws of Dharma, of the karmic price for abduction, of the fury of Rama. But Ravana, blinded by pride, dismissed him, laughed at him, accused him of cowardice. In the court of demons, compassion was weakness, and Vibhishana had crossed the line. So he left, not in secret, not in shame, but openly, solemnly, and with a broken heart. He crossed the battlefield and walked into Rama's camp, unarmed, uncertain, but unwavering. And the question rose, can a Rakshasa be trusted, even one who speaks of righteousness, even one who claims to stand for truth? Rama, in his divine wisdom, answered not with suspicion, but with clarity. One who seeks refuge must never be turned away, he said, even if he comes from the house of the enemy. And with those words, Vibhishana was accepted, not as a pawn, but as an ally, a demon, yes, but also a devotee. What followed was not simple. Vibhishana did not become human. He did not renounce his blood. He remained a Rakshasa, but he used his insight, his knowledge of Lanka, to aid Rama. He revealed Ravana's secrets. He shared the structure of the fortress, the rhythms of the army, the weaknesses that pride had hidden. And yet, even in war, he mourned. Every fallen soldier was once his kin. Every arrow struck at the past he once belonged to. When Ravana fell, when Lanka trembled beneath the weight of Rama's arrows and the fire of Hanuman's wrath, Vibhishana did not celebrate. He wept for his brother, for his people, for the kingdom that could have been saved. And yet, he stepped forward when asked to rule because the kingdom needed healing, and there was no other hand that could offer it without blood. Vibhishana was crowned king of Lanka, not as a conqueror, but as a custodian, a demon king with a conscience, a ruler who remembered the cost of forgetting Dharma. And under his rule, Lanka prospered, not through fear, but through balance. The fire was still in his veins, but it warmed rather than burned. His story is unique in the great epics. Among gods and warriors, sages and serpents, Vibhishana stands as a paradox, a Rakshasa who became a symbol of virtue, a being born of darkness who chose light. His transformation is not one of body, but of will. It is proof that destiny is not fixed, that blood is not a sentence, that even the cursed can choose to bless. But this choice is not easy. Vibhishana's legacy is not universally praised. In some retellings, he is seen as a traitor, one who abandoned his brother in war. There are whispers that he betrayed Lanka to save himself, that his Dharma was disguised ambition. But this only deepens the mystery, because Dharma is never clean. It is never obvious. It is always tested in fire. What makes Vibhishana's story powerful is that it lives in the gray. He did not destroy evil with a weapon. He did not slay monsters. He made a choice, a quiet, dangerous choice, to walk away from what he knew, to stand beside those he had once feared, to speak truth in a place where lies were easier. In doing so, he became something rare, a bridge. In the ancient cosmology, Rakshasas are often portrayed as enemies of the gods. But what if that was never their fate? What if it was only their story, waiting to be rewritten? Vibhishana rewrote it. He did not deny what he was. He simply refused to let it define him. And that is the deepest magic of all. In South India, there are temples where Vibhishana is still honored. His statues are not monstrous. They are noble, devotees light lamps at his feet, not because he was flawless, but because he proved that even among demons, the divine can bloom. His story is a reminder that the line between Asura and Deva is not drawn in the sky, it is drawn in the heart, and perhaps that is why his tale still matters. In a world where lines blur, where identities twist, where right and wrong often wear each other's masks, Vibhishana stands in the middle, not because he was torn, but because he chose to see clearly. He reminds us that the loudest roar is not always the bravest sound, that sometimes it takes more courage to leave the battle than to fight it, that the hardest thing to do is to be good when no one else around you is. Even now, the story continues, in the silence, before we speak, in the space between our thoughts, in the moment where we must choose between the world we came from and the world we want to build, because in every age, in every heart, the question returns, will you be like the others, or will you be like Vibhishana?
They were not born screaming, but swearing vengeance. Their first breath carried not innocence, but fire, not from evil, but from grief. The deities were born of a mother's fury, shaped by pain, so ancient that even the gods trembled to remember it. These were no ordinary demons. These were titans, colossi of the underrealms, children of the goddess, deity, and each of them carried in their towering frame a single purpose, the destruction of the heavens. To understand the deities, one must first understand deity. She was no mere Asura queen. She was a mother, a consort of the sage Kashyapa, and the sister of a deity, the mother of the Devas. But fate carved a cruel path between the two. When Diti's children were slaughtered by the gods, the very sons of her own sister, something broke within her. She retreated not into sorrow, but into silence, into the long, brooding weight of vengeance. And there in the depths of her womb, she nurtured a storm. The birth of the deities was not a moment, it was a rebellion, an uprising against cosmic hierarchy. These were not petty demons or shadows in the woods, they were supernatural beings, with the strength of mountains and intellects that rivaled sages. Some even say they were born glowing with a dark light, as if night itself had condensed into form. They were destined from the very beginning, not for lives of peace, but for war against the gods. The names of the deities ripple through ancient scriptures like thunder across the sky. Hiranyaksha, who plunged the earth into the depths of the cosmic ocean. Hiranyakshipu, who defied death itself. Tarakasura, who sought to destroy Shiva. Each deities was a storm, with a name, a force not of mindless evil, but of intelligent defiance. They did not merely wish to conquer, they wished to upend the order of existence, and yet the deities were not beasts. They built vast kingdoms, realms of astonishing beauty, filled with architecture and art. They studied Vedic sciences. They performed tapasya, severe penance, to gain boons from the very gods they opposed. Their power did not come from theft or cruelty alone. It came from discipline, from focus, from a twisted but brilliant will. That is what made them dangerous. Deities often appear in the Puranas and epics not as villains to be scorned, but as cautionary beings, complex, tragic, even admirable in their ambition. Their rage was born from injustice, but their downfall always came when vengeance became obsession. They are reminders of a dangerous truth, that the line between justice and wrath is as thin as breath. Take Hiranyaksha, his very name means he whose eyes are golden. He was no fool, he knew the secrets of the cosmos, yet he chose to challenge Vishnu himself by abducting the earth and hiding her in the primordial waters. His aim was not destruction for its own sake, but humiliation of the gods who had betrayed his kin. He was met by Vishnu in his Varaha avatar, a bull with the force of a star. Their battle shook the universe, mountains crumbled, oceans boiled, and when the dust settled,
Hiranyaksha lay dead, but with defiance still burning in his lifeless eyes. His brother Hiranyakshipu went further. He did not attack from outside. He attacked the structure of fate itself. Through long austerities, he gained a boon from Brahma, that he could not be killed by man or beast, inside or outside, day or night, on earth or in the sky, with weapon or tool. He had found the perfect loophole in destiny. He had become in his own mind immortal, and for a while he was. But deities, for all their brilliance, often underestimate one thing: the divine will does not obey contracts. When his own son Prahlada turned to Vishnu in love and faith, Hiranyakshipu tried to crush him, and so Vishnu came, not as man, not as beast, but as Narasimha, the man-lion. He struck at twilight, on the threshold, placed the demon on his lap, and tore him open with claws. The loophole collapsed, the deities fell, and yet his legend lived on. The deities were not destroyed by power, they were undone by pride, but not all deities were slain. Some lived in retreat, others transformed. In esoteric traditions, some tantric paths speak of deities, not as external beings, but as inner energies, the raw forces of ambition, strength, and rage that can either elevate or destroy. The name deities itself means son of deities, and deities is no demon. She is divine, which means the deities are not inherently evil. They are divine potential untethered by humility. There are even temples in India where certain deities are worshipped. In some versions of local legends, Hiranyakshipu is not a villain, but a misunderstood seeker. In others, Tarakasura is seen as a tragic hero, a father who only fought the gods to protect his sons. And in deeper yogic philosophy, the deities represents the ego, massive, powerful, determined, but ultimately blind to the subtle truth that all power, unanchored from surrender, turns in on itself. Their war was never truly with the devas, it was with the fabric of the universe, because the deities did not seek to dominate. They sought to rewire the cosmic order, to rewrite the meaning of power, to ascend beyond the boundaries assigned to them, and that is why they had to fall, because they dared to question the system, because they refused to kneel, and maybe, just maybe, because they got too close to a dangerous kind of truth. Today, echoes of the deities linger in unexpected places, in the fire of a revolutionary, in the mind of the genius who challenges sacred traditions, in the eyes of a child who questions every rule. Not all defiance is evil, not all challenges are wrong. The deities remind us that rebellion is a sacred flame, but one that can burn the world if wielded without balance. They were giants, not just in body, but in will. They reached too far, flew too high, dared too much, and so, like all who seek to surpass the gods, they fell. But perhaps they never truly vanished. Perhaps they sleep, like embers in the collective soul of the world, waiting for a new age. A new injustice, a new mother who whispers to her unborn child, "You will make them remember." Because hatred is not born in isolation, it is inherited, it is sculpted, and sometimes it builds titans.
He hated the silence of the stars. He hated the rhythm of creation. He hated the arrogance of the gods who floated above, while his kind bled beneath. Hiranyaksha did not begin as a monster. He began as a child of fury, born into a world where power was hoarded in the heavens, and fate was a script written without his name. And so he made a choice. Few would dare. If the world would not listen to him, he would take it. He did not declare war like a general. He did not strike armies like a king. No, Hiranyaksha did something far more terrifying. He reached into the depths of the universe, found the earth herself, and stole her, not a land, not a kingdom. The entire earth, the planet, the being, the goddess. He took her, wrapped in chains of force,
and hurled her into the depths of the cosmic ocean, where light drowns and sound dies. The act sent a tremor through all three worlds. Mortals prayed in panic. Sages turned pale. Even the gods fell into silence, because Earth was not just a place. She was Budeva, a living, breathing entity, the foundation of all karma, the womb of all birth. Without her, the cycle would collapse. Time would shatter, and Hiranyaksha knew it. But why did he do it? Hiranyaksha was no brute. His name, ironically, means golden-eyed. He was beautiful, brilliant, a Datra, a titan born of Diti, and the sage Kashyapa, brother to Hiranyakashipu, and like many of his kind, he was born into a universe that considered him lesser. He watched the devas claim the heavens, watched sages praise the celestial order, watched his people pushed to the margins of myth, and in that bitterness, something bloomed, not hatred, but hunger. He sought power, not out of cruelty, but clarity. He performed terrible penance, austerities so intense, the very sky darkened, and Brahma, bound by cosmic law, had to answer. He granted Hiranyaksha invulnerability from gods, demons, humans, every being of the known world. What he did not account for was the unknown. Armed with this boon, Hiranyaksha became unstoppable. He carved through the realms like a living weapon. Even the gods could not stop him. And then, in a single moment of wrath and brilliance, he descended into the earth's core and ripped her from her place. It was not theft, it was vengeance, but the cosmos cannot be left in imbalance. And so Vishnu came, not as a resplendent deity, not as a crowned savior, but as a boar, a wild, thunderous, tusked creature of earth and storm. Varaha, the third avatar, the god became beast, not out of mockery, but necessity, because only something primal could face something that had become more than monstrous. And in the churning waves of the cosmic ocean, where gravity bowed and stars spun, the boar and the demon met. The battle between Hiranyaksha and Varaha was not a mere duel. It was a war of mythic proportion, one that shattered the subtle fabric of existence. Oceans rose like walls, winds sliced like blades. Time itself slowed as the boar charged with the earth cradled on his tusks, and the demon howled, wielding weapons forged in fury. For 1,000 years, some say, the fight raged, though no time passed for mortals. In that space beyond time, truth faced madness, and the sea became their battleground. But Hiranyaksha was not just muscle. He mocked the gods. He laughed as he fought. He questioned Varaha's right to intervene. Where were your laws, he roared, when we were cast down? Where was your justice when we suffered? It was not just a battle of strength. It was a challenge to the divine order itself. And still, he fell. In the end, it was not strength that defeated him. It was Dharma, the will of balance. Vishnu struck him with the tusks of creation, the force of earth herself, and Hiranyaksha was destroyed. The earth was raised from the abyss, restored, but something had changed. Because for a moment, the gods had known fear. Because for a moment, one being had rewritten the order of the cosmos. And because the question Hiranyaksha asked never truly faded, what gives the gods the right to rule? In later interpretations, some schools of thought saw Hiranyaksha not only as a villain, but as a necessary force, a disturber of complacency, a question in the form of a demon. In certain tantric traditions, he represents the avadi, the primal ignorance that veils truth, not evil, but confusion, the darkness before light, the storm before stillness. Even the symbolism of Varahas is layered. Why a boar? Because the boar roots through filth, finds treasure in mud. It is the beast of the earth, grounded, unpretentious. In choosing this form, Vishnu did not flaunt superiority. He met Hiranyaksha on his own ground, strength for strength, soil for soil, and in doing so, restored not just the planet, but the possibility of rebirth. And yet, the fear remains. If one being could shake the worlds, what if another rises? What if there is another question the gods cannot answer? Because the earth was not just stolen, she was made vulnerable. That vulnerability is not forgotten. Somewhere in the cosmic memory, Hiranyaksha still exists, not as a body, but as an idea, a whisper in the mind of every being who asks, what if I could break the cycle? He was called a demon, a villain, a thief, but maybe, just maybe, he was a mirror. And when the gods look into that mirror, they do not always like what they see.
The gods believed it ended with Hiranyaksha, that with the earth restored, and the demon's body broken beneath Varaha's tusks, the cosmic order had been reaffirmed, that Dharma had triumphed, and balance had returned, that they had forgotten one thing. Hiranyaksha had a brother, and Hiranyaksha, Shipu, did not mourn with tears. He mourned with fire. Hiranyaksha, Shipu, felt his brother's death like a blade carved into his soul, but it was not grief that bloomed within him. It was rage, the kind of rage that does not cool, does not fade, does not seek peace, the kind of rage that stretches across lifetimes, wraps around stars, and festers in the cracks of creation. It was not just a hatred of Vishnu, it was hatred of everything he represented, of order, of rules, of a universe where beings like him, born of the earth, of darkness, of rebellion, were always cast as villains in a story they never agreed to be part of. Hiranyaksha looked at the death of his brother and made a vow. The devas would fall, the worlds would bend, and he, a Daitya, born of Diti, scorned by fate, would become immortal. He left behind his kingdom, his followers, even his fleshly comforts. He entered the stillness of the forest and began his penance, his tapasya, not for days, not for years, for centuries, standing on one leg, surrounded by fire, covered in ants, with no food, no breath, until the force of his focus burned a hole in the sky, until even the gods were disturbed. And then Brahma came, the creator, bound by the law of boons, appeared before the demon, and Hiranyaksha, Shipu, did not beg. He demanded no death by human or animal, no death indoors or outdoors, not during the day or night, no weapon, no element, no god, no mortal. Make me immortal, or as close as the law allows. Brahma, knowing the consequences, still nodded, because even divine beings must obey the echoes of their own promises. And with that, Hiranyaksha returned, no longer as a prince of the Daityas, but as a god-king in his own right. He waged war against the heavens, not with swords, but with certainty. He outlawed the name of Vishnu. He shattered temples. He declared himself the source, the center, the summit of all things. His armies marched across the earth, conquering sages, silencing priests, burning prayers before they reached the sky. The heavens grew quiet. The devas hid in fear. Indra trembled. Shiva waited, and Vishnu watched. But Hiranyaksha had a son, Prahlada, a boy born not of vengeance, but of devotion, a child who, despite the Daitya, blood in his veins, spoke the name of Vishnu with love, not hate, who prayed in silence while his father shouted, who saw the divine, not in conquest, but in stillness. And that was the wound Hiranyaksha could not endure. He tried to break him, to bend him, ordered him beaten, poisoned, drowned, thrown from cliffs, buried alive, burned. But Prahlada smiled through it all, because faith, when it is true, is invincible, and that invincibility drove Hiranyaksha, Tipu, mad. So he asked, one last time,
one fatal time. Where is your God now, Prahlada? In this pillar, in the sky, in your foolish heart. And the boy whispered, he is everywhere. That's when the pillar cracked, and Vishnu came, not as a man, not as a beast, but as something in between. Narasimha, the man-lion, neither human nor animal. At twilight, on a threshold, with his claws, not weapons, on his lap, not the ground, every condition of the boon, bypassed, every loophole, closed. Hiranyaksha, Kripu, once the terror of the cosmos, was torn apart in a moment, not in rage, in divine fury, the kind that is not anger, but correction, the kind that restores the wheel of time. But even in death, he did not break, because Hiranyaksha was not just a being. He was an archetype, a force, the endless hatred that grows when pain is ignored, when wrongs go unhealed, when power is denied, and then taken, the hatred that passes from brother to brother, from father to son, from life to life. In some versions, Hiranyaksha, Kripu and Hiranyaksha are not two souls, but one, divided, two halves of the same karmic fire, burning through time. In Vaishnava tradition, they are believed to be earlier incarnations of Jaya, the celestial gatekeepers of Vishnu, cursed to be born as demons for their pride. Hiranyaksha, 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 Kripu, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, Shisha, Pala, Dantavakra, each a mask, each a cycle, each a test, because hatred never dies. It hides, it waits, but so does love. Prahlada's survival wasn't just a child's miracle, it was proof that lineage does not define destiny, that from the deepest pit of hatred, a seed of devotion can still grow. He did not kill his father, he wept for him, he prayed for his soul, and in that moment, the cycle cracked, but not forever, because even today, the echoes of Hiranyaksha rumble through the world, in tyrants who silence truth, in systems that punish the faithful, in minds that believe themselves invincible. The hatred returns, again and again, not because we summon it, but because we never finish healing it. In that endless war between Daicha and Deva, between ego and surrender, between rage and devotion, we are all both sides. So ask yourself, when the pillar cracks, what steps out of it, and which voice inside you will it silence? Because the hatred is not gone, it is waiting, and it remembers your name.
They did not roar across battlefields or crush mountains beneath their feet. They did not thirst for blood or challenge the gods with brute strength. The Danavas were something far more dangerous. They were thinkers, dreamers, architects of alternate reality. While the Danavas raised their weapons and shook the heavens with wrath, the Danavas whispered in the silence between thoughts, unraveling the threads of reality with logic and sorcery. They were the shadowed sages of the Asura world, born not from fury, but from the desire to know. Their mother was Danu, the primordial goddess of primeval waters, older than many of the gods, older than memory itself. She was not a demoness, but a force of fluid potential. Her children, the Danavas, inherited her gift, the ability to move between forms, between truths, between illusions. They were not created to destroy, they were created to question, and that is what made them dangerous. While Devas wielded thunderbolts and light, the Danavas built palaces of thought. They studied the Vedas in secret. They mastered mantras too potent for the uninitiated. They turned their eyes inward and discovered not just how to manipulate nature, but how to rewrite it. Many were alchemists who could transmute elements with a word. Others were masters of Maya, illusion so potent it could bend armies to their will. There were those among them who could trap souls in dreams, others who could conjure entire worlds from dust and sound. Reality to a Danava was a suggestion, not a rule.
They are remembered not through a single figure, but through ripples of fear that passed through the devas whenever intellect became too sharp. Some scriptures speak of Maya Danava, the architect of illusions, who constructed flying cities, vast weapons of astral energy, and palaces that defied geometry. It was Maya Danava who built the city of Lanka for the Rakshas, and later Tripura, the triple cities of the Asuras that floated through the sky. These cities were invisible to the gods, protected by mantras and spells so deep even the stars forgot their shapes. But knowledge is never neutral. The Danavas did not seek destruction, they sought mastery. Yet mastery, without humility, leads to control, and control, once achieved, demands obedience. The Danavas believed they could equal the gods through understanding. They believed that truth, when wielded properly, could replace divinity. And so they challenged the sacred order, not with war cries, but with treatises, with diagrams, with spells. The Devas, for all their strength, feared them, because you can kill a beast, but how do you kill an idea? In some Purushic stories, the Danavas became the hidden hand behind the rise of many Asura empires. They did not lead from the front, they whispered into ears, advised kings, taught forbidden sciences in the deep hours of the night. Their names often vanish from the retelling, because the victors fear the teachers more than the tyrants. For what is a sword without the mind that forged it? But the gods responded. When the Danavas built Tripura, Shiva was called. The gods could not touch the cities. They were too well guarded, too cleverly hidden in layers of dimensional illusion. But Shiva, with his third eye, the eye of wisdom beyond intellect, struck them down in a single breath. The cities, suspended in the sky, collapsed like thought forms shattered by a sudden awakening. It wasn't power that destroyed them, it was clarity. Because even the greatest knowledge, when rooted in ego, cannot survive enlightenment. Yet the story doesn't end there. The Danavas did not disappear. They retreated into the cracks of culture, into forgotten rituals, into half-remembered texts that only the most reckless scholars now study. They exist not as armies, but as whispers, as ideas so subtle you don't know they've entered your mind until it's too late. Every forbidden grimoire, every untranslatable verse, every mantra that bends more than it should, bears their echo. In Tantra, their legacy is ambiguous. Some traditions see them not as evil, but as keepers of a different truth, the left-hand path, where the seeker walks through shadow to find light. In certain yogic texts, the Danavas are not enemies, but guardians of deep thresholds, the doors that only open when illusion is mastered and transcended. But beware, not all who knock on those doors return. The Danava way is not for the faint of heart. It promises no peace, only understanding, and the price that comes with it. Even in modern India, remnants of their legacy remain. Temples built with strange alignments, ancient weapons inscribed with unknown glyphs, caves where geometry folds inward. Some claim the architectural wonders of the Indus Valley carry their signature, not because the Danavas built them, but because the minds that designed them were touched by the same force, the thirst to know what should not be known. And so the Danavas live on, not as figures in stone, but as pressure behind the mind, the sudden insight that shatters the old world, the whisper in the ear of the scientist on the edge of discovery. The lure of forbidden wisdom, wrapped in the illusion of harmless knowledge. They are not gone, they are watching, and if you look too closely at the nature of reality, if you dig too deep into the layers of illusion, you may find one waiting for you, not with teeth, not with fire, but with a question, a single, impossible question, the kind that once asked cannot be unlearned.
He was not a warrior, nor a king, nor even a ruler of legions. Maya Danava,
did not raise weapons with his hands. He made the weapons that turned gods into dust. He did not conquer cities. He built cities that could not be conquered, and he did not lie. He constructed lies so perfect, they became reality. Among the Danavas, Maya was more than a sorcerer, he was a phenomenon, the embodiment of Maya itself, illusion as architecture, deception as science, reality as clay beneath his will. In the shadowed margins of ancient texts, Maya is described not merely as a being, but as an architect of perception. The mind itself was his battlefield. He did not attack from the front. He reshaped the ground. You walked on until you no longer knew which way was forward. In a world governed by divine law, Maya played by different rules, or perhaps he rewrote them entirely. He could summon entire fortresses from mantra, construct flying palaces that shimmered like mirages, and weave entire planes of existence where truth and fiction traded places. But his most terrifying skill was not his magic. It was his understanding. Maya Danava knew how gods thought. He studied the divine. He anticipated. He reverse-engineered miracles. In many forgotten accounts, it is said he even dissected celestial weapons and reassembled them in darker forms. To Maya, knowledge was not sacred. It was a tool, or worse, a weapon. His name first rises in the mythic wars of the Asuras, where he appears not as a combatant, but as a silent hand behind the chaos. He was the one who built the Tripura, the 3 flying cities of the Asuras that floated above the earth, unreachable, invincible, invisible. Each city was aligned with cosmic geometry, protected by tantric sigils, and powered by incantations so powerful, even Brahma hesitated to gaze upon them. They were not just cities, they were moving dimensions, hovering across time and space, and at their center was Maya's great throne of black crystal, from where he whispered his truths to those who would listen. The gods were helpless. Even Indra, armed with Vajra, could not pierce the walls of illusion. The Devas watched as their enemies ascended into the skies, protected not by strength, but by architecture. Shiva was finally summoned. With a single arrow, crafted from the fire of the sun, the weight of the mountains, and the silence of Brahman, he struck when all 3 cities aligned for a single moment. In 1,000 years, the cities burned. Tripura fell, but Maya Danava escaped. Because Maya was not in the cities, he was in the illusion of safety they offered. In another tale, Maya appears in the Mahabharata, offering his talents to the Pandavas. After Arjuna spares his life, in return, Maya builds the fabled Maya Sabha, a hall so complex and shimmering that even gods were confounded inside it. The floors looked like water, and the pools appeared as stone. Duryodhana, unable to tell illusion from reality, walked into a false lake, humiliated before all. That single moment of shame, birthed in Maya's hall, was one of the sparks that led to the great war of Kurukshetra. Maya did not fight in that war. He had already won. Long before the chariots rolled, even the greatest warriors could not defend themselves against Maya's true weapon, perception. He understood that the world is not made of matter, but belief, that to control what someone sees is to control what they do, and in a universe where thought shapes destiny, Maya was a god of gods, a god of minds. His works are whispered in the science of Vastu Shastra, the ancient architectural discipline of sacred space. Some claim the strange geometries found in ancient temples are echoes of his knowledge, twisted and tamed by human hands. The flying machines of the Vaimanika Shastra, those chariots that defy gravity and logic, are said to be reverse traces of Maya's blueprints, lost to time, but not to legend. But where did he go? Some say Maya was cursed by the gods to dwell in the Patala realms, deep beneath the earth, where he still builds worlds too strange for surface minds. Others say he slipped into the folds of time, living in cycles, waiting for a new age to rise, one where illusion will be the true king. And some, those who study the occult sciences in silence, claim Maya never left, that he exists in every illusion we now call technology, in every simulation, in every artificial world where the real has been replaced by the felt. When you believe what you see, even when it's false, Maya wins, because illusion is no longer just a mystical power, it is the structure of civilization. But Maya Denava was never just a villain, he was a question, a challenge, a force that asked the gods if truth is eternal, why does it bend so easily under the pressure of beauty? If Dharma is clear, why does a lie in the right shape control more hearts than 1,000 sermons? And if creation belongs to the divine, why can a demon shape it better? Even today, the name Maya carries fear in some traditions and reverence in others. In the Shakta paths, Maya is not a demon, but a goddess, the veil of illusion that must be transcended. But the original Maya Denava was no veil, he was the hand that wove it, not to hide truth, but to test whether you could recognize it. He did not claim your soul, he offered you a mirror, and behind your own reflection, he waited. They never carried swords into battle. Their strength was not in muscle, but in mantra, not in steel, but in syllables. The Danavas, children of Danu, walked through the world as shadows behind wisdom, masters of a knowledge so deep that it bent the very fabric of creation. They were not content with prayers or devotion. They sought the mechanics behind divinity, the algorithms of the universe. They were the sorcerers who studied the secrets no mortal was meant to know. And when they turned their eyes to the gods, it was not in worship, but in rivalry. Unlike the Danajas, whose wars painted the heavens in fire, the Danavas waged a slower, more terrifying war, one of intellect, of ritual precision, of spells woven so tightly into the structure of reality that even the Devas began to doubt their place. These were not crude magicians, they were scientists of the soul, engineers of unseen forces, and their laboratories were carved into the cliffs of the netherworld. They studied Tantra in its purest, most dangerous form, not for liberation, but for domination. The Danavas understood a truth that many feared, that the laws of reality were programmable, that mantras, when perfectly constructed, could rewire karma itself, that yantras, sacred geometries, were not just symbols, but circuits. And once that knowledge was unlocked, even immortality could be reverse engineered. They called upon Vedic forces and forced them into obedience. They summoned planetary powers and chained them with words. They deciphered the vibrations that held atoms together and sought to collapse them. In their hands, fire became a scalpel, space, a scroll, and the gods, merely administrators of a system they were rewriting from below. One such story speaks of Shambhara, a powerful Danava who learned how to conceal himself in the folds of illusion. He created illusory landscapes, so potent that not even Indra could find him. It was only through Krishna's incarnation that the deception was penetrated, and Shambhara destroyed. But even in death, his techniques lived on, passed in whispers through the dark corridors of forgotten knowledge. Another Danava, Viprachiti, led armies of sorcerers who could transform day into night, and twist fate like clay. They battled not with weapons, but with curses invoking Brahmaastras, weapons of cosmic origin, that once unleashed could melt time. The Devas struggled against these forces, not because they lacked power, but because they lacked understanding. To fight a Danava was to fight your own mind unraveling, a duel of perception as much as strength. And then there were the Astras themselves, divine weapons that responded to thought, not touch. The Danavas studied these relics, created counter-weapons, and even forged their own. It is said that during the Age of Demons, some possessed nuclear fire in mantra form. a power that echoes eerily in modern descriptions of advanced energy weapons. Some accounts in the Mahabharata and Puranas describe weapons whose activation required not a key, but purity of intention, or the ability to override intention entirely through sorcery. This was the true threat of the Danavas, not their hatred of the gods, but their ability to become like them, and yet, they always fell, not because their knowledge was flawed, but because their thirst was endless, their desire to control, to surpass, to replace, it burned too hot. In seeking to rewrite the universe, they forgot their own place within it. The same mantras they used to raise citadels could collapse them. The same energies they summoned for power turned on them when misaligned by the tiniest egoic flicker. It wasn't the gods who destroyed them. It was the instability of power without stillness. The gods, for all their faults, often acted as maintainers. They balanced, but the Danavas experimented. They were like cosmic hackers, always pushing the system to its limits, and in doing so, they exposed weaknesses even the gods had never considered. Some say the Danavas built interdimensional vehicles, Vimanas, powered by sound and light, that they could alter gravity using precise geometric alignments and chants, that the cities they built in Patala, the subterranean realms, were more advanced than anything the surface world ever knew. There are temples in India, even today, with pillars that hum when touched, with resonance that defies their age, stones fused without mortar, designs aligned to stars not visible in the current sky. Are these traces of Danava knowledge, echoes of a science buried in myth? Perhaps the most chilling aspect of their legacy is this: the Danavas were not extinguished, they were assimilated. Their knowledge was not destroyed, it was hidden, translated into allegory, encoded in symbolism, protected by warnings. The ancient sages knew that the line between vidya, sacred knowledge, and avidya, destructive knowledge, was razor thin, and so they buried the formulas, broke the sequences, scattered the syllables across generations. But even scattered, power calls, and there are always those who listen. In the left-hand paths of Tantra, in the forgotten mantras that must not be chanted aloud, in the ash-covered ascetics who meditate beside cremation fires, the Danava influence lingers, not as a threat, but as a choice, a reminder that wisdom without humility is not liberation, but a cage lined with mirrors. The war between the gods and Danavas was not a war of good versus evil, it was a war of knowledge versus wisdom, of brilliance without restraint, and that war never truly ended. It now lives within every seeker who asks too many questions, every scientist who peers too far, every mystic who sees the structure of the soul and thinks, what if I changed it? Because the gods may wield power, but the Danavas knew how it worked, and that knowledge is still out there, waiting, in symbols, in sound, in silence.
They do not roar, they do not command, they do not stride into battle wearing crowns of flame or wielding weapons forged in myth. The Pishash are not conquerors, they are not seducers of power or philosophers of darkness. They are something far worse. They are the rot that waits beneath everything, the whisper beneath breath, the shadow that crawls closer, not with hunger, but with patience. Where Datyas and Danavas fall in great wars, the Pishash win one soul at a time, slowly, silently, irreversibly, born, it is said, from the breath of Brahma when it turns sour, or from the sins of men coagulated into form. Pishash are not truly part of any realm. They are interstitial. They live in the between life and death, sanity and madness, body and spirit. You will not see them coming. You will only feel something off, an unease in a room, a whisper in a language you don't remember learning, a dream that smells of blood. They haunt cremation grounds, decaying forests, abandoned temples,
Anywhere the veil is thin, and the living begin to forget, they are alive. They feed on charnel energy, not just flesh, but everything that breaks down, disease, despair, trauma. They don't create chaos, they wait for it. Like worms in a fruit, they know their time always comes. What separates them from other demons is that they do not attack strength, they circle it. They wait, but the moment a soul begins to slip from illness, from grief, from obsession, from isolation, the Pishasha moves, not to kill, but to enter. Possession is their true weapon. They do not wear bodies like disguises, they wear them like homes, and once inside, they begin to twist from the inside out. Thought becomes paranoia, love becomes fixation, fear becomes language. Victims often don't know they are inhabited, they simply decay, slowly, spiritually, and then physically. Ancient Ayurvedic texts even list symptoms believed to be caused by Pishasha possession: hallucinations, loss of appetite, self-harm, speaking in unknown tongues, extreme rage, or complete apathy. But the medical world wrote these off as mental illness. Only a few remembered the warnings carved into temple stones: where words rot, there the Pishasha dwells. There are many types. Some slither, some fly, some crawl into the cracks of skin and hide in blood. Some wear the faces of the dead. The most feared are those who mimic the voices of loved ones, drawing their victims into conversation. Then madness. In folklore, they sometimes appear as gaunt figures with bulging eyes and dripping mouths. But this is only a shape. They are not form-bound. They are concepts, animated. Hunger given intention, despair given breath. In the Mahabharata, there are mentions of Pishashas infesting battlefields after slaughter, not to celebrate, but to feed, not just on corpses, but on the psychic residue of war, the screams, the guilt, the rage. They are parasites of karma, gnawing on unprocessed pain. Some tantric practitioners, particularly those on the left-hand path, do not flee from Pishashas, they attempt to harness them. In rare dangerous rituals, adepts offer flesh, blood or ash to summon and bind these spirits. It is said that one who controls a Pishasha can send it to torment an enemy, reveal secrets from the underworld, or even learn the language of ghosts. But control is always an illusion. Pishashas do not bargain, they bide. They also possess a strange wisdom, the kind born of decay. Because they linger at the end of cycles, they see what the living cannot. The Pishasha knows when a man will fall before he takes the first misstep. They recognize the small cracks in character that will become fault lines, and they whisper encouragement. Their presence is sometimes subtle, a room that grows colder, not with temperature, but with something more ancestral. Dreams that repeat always in the same ruins. A sense that someone has been standing just behind you, forever. And then there are the voices, always just faint enough to be mistaken for thought. In certain regions of India, especially in the Himalayan foothills and old cremation towns, like Varanasi, people still perform Pishasha Shanti rituals, designed to pacify or drive away these beings. Offerings of mustard seeds, black sesame, and clarified butter are thrown into sacred fires at night, while priests chant protective mantras. Children are kept indoors. Dogs howl without cause, not from fear, but recognition. Pishashas are also said to haunt crossroads, especially those near burial grounds. It is believed that at midnight, if you linger at such a place and think of someone you've lost, a Pishasha may answer in their voice. If you respond, even once, it follows you home. But perhaps their most chilling aspect is this: Pishashas are not entirely evil. They are a mirror. They do not invade without invitation, not spoken, but lived. They thrive where we rot, where we lie to ourselves, where trauma is buried instead of faced, where death is hidden, denied, or sterilized. In this way they are reminders, forces that say decay is real, Madness is not the enemy, it is a door, and behind that door, they wait, watching, humming, remembering your name, because the Pishasha does not need your body, only your silence.
They do not strike like lightning, or roar like demons of legend. Pishachas unravel you. They do not need to chase or hunt. All they require is for you to feel fear, grief, shame, guilt, dread, and then they begin their slow feast, not with claws, but with silence. The silence that gets inside your bones, a stillness that grows louder than screams, and once they're inside, they don't burn, they erode. This is how they feed, not on blood or flesh, but on suffering. It begins with exhaustion, the kind sleep cannot fix. You close your eyes, and your mind turns. Faces appear, some familiar, some warped. You hear voices, whispers, not loud enough to understand, but too clear to ignore. You wake drenched in sweat, your pulse frantic, but the room is still. Nothing is wrong, and yet everything is. The Pishacha has already entered, not through ritual or curse, but through your own weakness, the fracture in your soul you never healed, a heartbreak, a secret, a trauma too old to name. That is the door. They don't knock, they seep in like moisture into old walls, and once inside, they bring their hunger. Your thoughts grow disjointed, paranoia flickers at the edges of reason. Did that shadow move? Was that your name being spoken, just barely outside the range of hearing? Your appetite fades. The mirror no longer feels like your reflection, and sleep, precious sleep, becomes a battlefield, because dreams are no longer your own. Pishachas are not simple parasites, they are architects of madness. Within your dreams, they build mazes, they take memories and twist them, insert events that never happened, make you feel things you never felt, and then leave you wondering if they always existed. They replay guilt like a chorus. They show you things that make you question not just the world but yourself. You begin to doubt your perceptions, your relationships, even your sanity. They want you disoriented. That's where the flavor is. In ancient Ayurvedic tradition, symptoms of Pishacha presence were described in clinical detail: sudden weight loss, emotional outbursts, inability to form coherent thought, persistent nightmares, and what was once called soul dulling, the gradual loss of interest in life. Victims speak of a strange hollowness, as if their emotions are being siphoned off, as if they're watching their life from behind a pane of glass. They still walk, they still speak, but they are no longer in themselves. The Pishacha doesn't consume the body, it hollow out the soul. In remote parts of India and Nepal, there are old customs still whispered at night. Don't answer voices that call from dark corners. Don't stare too long into the forest after sundown. Don't speak of your fears while sitting under a peepal tree, because the Pishacha listens, and once it learns your pain, it knows where to dig. One of their favorite methods is isolation. Friends stop calling. You begin to suspect betrayal where none exists. You withdraw. Slowly, your support system crumbles, not because they turned on you, but because the Pishacha twisted your perception. It whispers, they don't care. You're alone. This is what you deserve. And if you believe it, you've already been devoured. Sometimes they pass from one person to another, not like a contagion, but like a curse. If someone close to you collapses under their weight, the emotional aftermath becomes fertile ground. In this way, Pishachas leap through grief, like embers caught on the wind. There are ancient remedies, yes, not cures, containments, mustard seeds scattered around the bed, copper talismans engraved with protective mantras, recitation of specific Vedic hymns, like the Pishacha Nashana Stotra.
But even those are only effective if the soul itself wants to return. Because the Pishacha cannot stay if you choose life, truly choose it, over the delicious familiarity of despair. But that's their greatest trick. They make suffering feel inevitable. They make you believe the world has always been like this. The longer they feed, the less you remember joy, the less you care for warmth. They wear down the soul until it's thin, transparent, flavorless, and then they move on, leaving behind only a husk, a being that still breathes, but is no longer alive. These husks, in legend, sometimes become like them, not Pishachas in form, but in function. People who carry the energy of decay within them, who destroy joy in others, without knowing why, who infest rooms with discomfort, who curse with glances. They become the next doorway. The Pishachas don't live in a realm we can banish. They live where pain is allowed to fester. They exist in our collective blind spots, in how we bury sorrow instead of healing it, in how we ignore madness until it becomes malignant, in how we let suffering become invisible. And so they flourish, not just in jungles and graveyards, but in cities, in apartments where the lights are never fully on, in eyes that have seen too much, in minds that whisper too often to themselves, because suffering, when unacknowledged, is a banquet, and the Pishacha is always hungry. So tonight, if sleep doesn't come easily, if your thoughts loop in strange patterns, if you hear your name softly spoken, with no mouth nearby, do not answer, do not follow, and above all do not feed it with fear, because once they know your flavor, they will never forget it. And no lock, no prayer, no medicine in this world can stop a demon that feeds on what you refuse to heal.
The Pishacha does not need your name. It does not require invitation. It waits where memory ends, where the heartbeat of the living no longer echoes. Cemeteries, battlefields, abandoned ruins, forgotten thresholds of temples long since reclaimed by moss. These are not just places of the dead, they are temples, and in those temples, the Pishacha does not worship, it waits. The silence in such places is not natural, it is a carved-out absence, deliberate and alive. There is a stillness in graveyards that speaks in reverse. It isn't the kind that brings peace, it's the kind that listens, where each breath you take feels borrowed, where your footsteps sound too loud, too real, as if disturbing something beneath the surface. That is when they notice you, not because you're special, but because you're there. The Pishachas are most potent in Shmashana, cremation grounds, especially at night. In Hindu tradition, these places are sacred, but dangerous, not because of the dead, but because of what the dead leave behind. The soul may depart, but the echoes remain. Fear, grief, confusion, rage, all of it becomes ash, smoke, and scent. It is in that residue that the Pishacha slithers, crawling between the layers of dimension. There's an old belief that no fire ever goes completely cold in a cremation ground, that some embers, invisible to the eye, never extinguish. That's because the Pishacha feeds from it, sustains it, not to keep the fire alive, but to keep the energy alive. Death, as an event, ends quickly, but death, as a vibration, lingers for centuries. Ancient texts warn of crossing graveyards during Rahu Kal, the inauspicious period of the day when energy tilts toward the unstable. In such moments, time thins, and the Pishacha, for a moment, can brush against you. You won't feel a wound, but something will cling, a thought you can't shake, a face you never met, a whisper in your own voice, telling you to return. In Varanasi, near Manikarnika Ghat, the most active cremation ground in India,
There are sadhus who have lived among the fires for decades, agari, ascetics, who meditate among bones and ashes, wearing garlands of skulls. They don't do this to challenge death, but to know it, to see past illusion. Some say they talk to pishachas. Some say they become like them, channeling their madness, not as corruption, but as revelation. But even they light fires every night, not for warmth, for protection, because even those who understand death do not always want to invite what feeds on it. There are ruins scattered across India, temples buried in forest, forts overtaken by vines, where the air changes before you even cross the threshold. Historians study the architecture, tourists pose for photos, but the locals, they do not stay after dark, not because of ghosts, but because of the emptiness that seeps in. Places where gods were once worshipped, but now forgotten, where devotion has faded, and silence has festered. This is not mere absence. This is a feast for something old. One such place is Bangar Fort in Rajasthan, a beautiful ruin now infamous for its atmosphere. Legends say a tantric cursed the city after being rejected, and ever since, no one who stays overnight leaves sane. Whether that tale is truth or myth, the feeling of dread there is undeniable. Animals do not sleep within the walls. Electronic devices fail, and visitors often report hearing voices where none should be. The government has even placed a sign, "No entry after sunset," not for safety, for something else. The pishacha does not haunt like a ghost. It does not wear chains or scream through halls. It doesn't need to. Its power is subtler, the slow drain of presence, the way you lose time while standing in one place, the way thoughts turn inward, looping darker and darker, the way a name you never knew comes to you, whispering from the broken stones and battlefields. Those are banquets, wherever blood soaked into the earth in great quantities, the veil thins. Kurukshetra, Panipat, Talikota, fields that once thundered with war, now eerily still, but the ground remembers, and so do the pishachas. They do not feed on the living, they feed on the moment after, when men realized what they had done, when pride curdled into grief. That emotion too large to bear, too deep to speak, becomes a nectar for them, and so they wait in those places for visitors who come with open hearts, who mourn the past, who empathize, because empathy makes a soul soft, and soft souls sink into shadow. It is believed that certain forms of yoga, practiced at the wrong location, especially where many have died, can awaken the presence of pishachas. Breath work done at night in such a place can open subtle channels not meant to be opened. The boundary between spirit and matter thins. The practitioner may hear voices during meditation, experience visions of terrifying clarity, and in extreme cases, be unable to return to baseline consciousness. Even now, many Indian families perform rituals when passing a cemetery, touching their heads, whispering mantras, or simply avoiding eye contact with the land of the dead. Children are told not to look too long at funeral processions, not because of superstition, but because acknowledgement is an opening. The pishacha is not summoned with ceremony, it is summoned with attention, and yet for all this, they are not invincible. Faith, true, burning, clear-eyed faith, drives them away, not dogma, not recitation, but belief so strong that no decay can cling to it. In ancient rites, when priests perform last rituals for the dead, they often invoke Agni, the fire god, not just to carry the soul, but to burn clean the space, to purify what the pishacha would otherwise consume, because light, real light, doesn't just illuminate, it starves the darkness. So if you find yourself walking past a forgotten graveyard, if a ruin calls to you, if the silence of a place seems too heavy for its stones, remember, you're not alone, you never were. Something else walks those grounds barefoot and waiting, not with rage, but with patience, not to harm but to feed. And in those places, Even your breath is a prayer, because if the Pishacha hears it, it knows you're warm, and warm things rot the best. The dark cannot be erased, only pushed back. And in the ancient traditions of Hinduism, the tools to do so are neither swords nor flames. They are older, subtler, more mysterious, vibrations that bend reality, shapes that trap the formless, fire that speaks, mantras, rituals, and yantras. These are the weapons forged not in iron, but in understanding. They do not destroy evil, they remind it where it cannot go. A mantra is not just a word, it is a frequency, a code that reshapes the space around it. To chant a mantra correctly is not to beg the gods, it is to speak in their language, to realign the bones of the world. Each syllable is a seed, and when planted with precision, it grows into a barrier that no shadow can cross. But the key is not the sound, it is the state of the speaker. You cannot speak a mantra with doubt, because demons do not fear the words, they fear the certainty. The Maha Mystery Tianjaya mantra, chanted to ward off death itself, is said to burn like invisible fire when spoken with true intent. Its rhythm activates a subtle geometry within the mind and body, invoking Shiva, the destroyer of illusion. Another, the Narayana Kavacham, is a spiritual armor, layered verse by verse, like chainmail for the soul. Each line names a part of the body, and binds it with divine protection. It is not metaphor, it is a design. But mantras alone are not enough. Rituals, ancient, precise, terrifying in their beauty, are the architecture of spiritual defense. Performed at dawn or midnight, depending on the entity being repelled, these rituals follow cosmic alignments, the positioning of the priest, the direction of the fire, the color of the cloth, the placement of the rice grains. Every detail matters, because rituals are not acts of worship, they are instructions to the universe. When performed correctly, they transform a space. A simple hut becomes a fortress, a circle of ash becomes a wall, and for a time, the rules of the spirit world are rewritten. Demons cannot enter, shadows hesitate, because the ritual does not chase them, it disorients them, it reminds them they are not in their realm. But perhaps the most mysterious of all tools is the yantra. At first glance, a yantra appears simple, just a geometric design, often drawn in red ink or etched into copper. But to those who understand, it is a trap, a prison for forces that cannot be held. Every triangle, every lotus petal, every concentric circle has meaning. They are maps of power, not only protective, but active. They pulse, they breathe, they vibrate with encoded energy. One of the most feared yantras is the Bulbhurva yantra, used to summon and control fierce protective spirits. Another, the Baglamukhi yantra, is designed to paralyze the speech and actions of an enemy, physical or supernatural. These symbols are not drawn casually. They are created during specific planetary alignments, sometimes over several days, and infused with life through mantra repetition. Once activated, a yantra becomes a gate, or a wall, or a cage. But none of these tools are universally effective, because darkness adapts. Each pishacha, each asura, each force of chaos has its own resonance, and so the practitioner must know what they face. General prayers may shield, but true protection requires identification, knowing the name, the nature, the flavor of the darkness. This is why the oldest protectors, the tantric adepts and agori masters, do not flinch in the face of demons. They do not worship light blindly. They study the dark, they memorize its faces, so when it knocks they know which key turns the door, and still they do not claim safety. Because every shield has a limit. These defenses, mantras, rituals, yantras, are not permanent. They degrade, they falter if done without discipline, and worst of all, they fail. if the heart is not aligned. The sacred texts are clear. Intention is the true fuel. A mantra spoken in fear is a whisper. A mantra spoken in devotion is a hammer. Evil cannot cross where conviction burns steady. This is why even the most powerful protection begins with purification of space, of speech, of mind. Fire is the purifier of choice. Agni, the god of flame, is seen as the carrier of offerings, the destroyer of impurities, the first deity invoked in many Vedic rituals. Sacred fires are lit in geometric pits, havan kunds, and fed with clarified butter, sandalwood and herbs like gugul and neem. The smoke that rises is said to carry not just scent, but vibration. In the invisible realm, it forms shapes, walls, weapons, even homes can be protected. A Vastu Puja, or house purification ritual, aligns a structure with cosmic energy. Certain doorways are sealed with turmeric and ash. Mirrors are covered. Cost of thread, blessed and bound in mantra, are tied above the main entrance, not as superstition, but as a ward, because entities enter where energy is confused. But for all these defenses, there remains one truth. They do not destroy evil. They remind the living who they are. That is their real power. They create a space where clarity returns, where fear lifts, where the soul remembers it is not prey. In that moment of remembrance, the demon hesitates. It recoils, not from the fire, but from the light behind the eyes of the one who stands firm, because darkness in its truest form cannot harm what refuses to be divided. And so these tools, sacred sounds, ritual flames, geometric shields, are not ancient because they are old. They are ancient because they still work, because every age forgets, and every shadow waits, until one voice, unwavering, speaks the syllable that cuts through illusion, and in that syllable, the light returns. In the darkest corners of time, when man could no longer distinguish dream from nightmare, when the howls of demons drowned out prayers, and the boundaries of reality began to tear, it was then that they appeared, not as saviors in the traditional sense, but as something older, something primal, divine not because they were untouchable, but because they stepped into corruption and chose to burn it away. Durga, Kali, Narasimha, Hanuman. These names are not just written in scripture, they are written in fire across the nightmares of demons. The ancient seers never described them as distant gods seated on untouchable thrones. They are storms with faces, symbols of divine intervention made flesh. When the balance of the universe tips, when darkness grows arrogant, these beings do not merely defend, they correct. They do not heal like gentle winds, they heal like fire. Durga was not born, she was forged. When Mahishasura, the buffalo demon, conquered the heavens, even the gods trembled, not because they lacked power, but because they lacked unity. And so, in an act of desperate harmony, they combined their energies, the essence of all their might, and from that union came Durga, riding a lion, with 10 arms wielding weapons not borrowed, but gifted. She was not made to plead, she was made to kill. For 9 nights, she battled Mahishasura, each day stripping away another layer of his illusion, his shape-shifting deceptions, until she faced his true form, and drove her trident through his heart. But that act was not just war, it was surgery. Mahishasura represented ego, unchecked ambition, and brute deception. Durga did not merely destroy him, she purified what he had infected. Then came Kali, darker still, born not of union, but of overflow. When Durga herself could not contain the rage that poured from her during a battle with Raktabija, a demon whose spilled blood birthed clones of himself, that wrath took form. Kali was not reason, she was necessity. With wild hair, blood-red tongue, and eyes like the void, she devoured the multiplying demons, before they could rise again. Her dance was not chaos, it was precision, a rhythm designed to remind the cosmos that unchecked suffering would be answered. Kali wears a garland of skulls, not as trophy, but as reminder. Every skull is a demon of thought, greed, delusion, fear, severed not in cruelty, but in liberation. Those who misunderstand her see only the horror, but those who understand see the mother, the one who steps between soul and ruin, baring her fangs, not at the innocent, but at the corruption that threatens them. And then there is Narasimha, the fourth avatar of Vishnu, born in a moment of paradox. The demon king Hiranyakashipu had secured a boon that he could not be killed by man or beast, inside or outside, day or night, on earth or in sky, with weapon or by hand. And so, Vishnu became the contradiction, neither man nor beast, a lion-headed being, neither inside nor outside, a threshold, neither day nor night, twilight, and he tore the demon apart, with claws, not weapons, on his lap, not the ground, but the true mystery of Narasimha is not his fury, it is what came after. Even the gods trembled before his rage. It was only the innocent presence of Prahlada, the demon's son, and a devout believer, that calmed the avatar. In this we see the deeper truth. Divine wrath is not blind, it is protective. It erupts only to destroy what threatens the sacred balance, and then it vanishes. Hanuman, the monkey god, does not wear armor, he does not crave thrones. His power is not in destruction, but in devotion. Yet in the Ramayana, when demons blocked Rama's path, it was Hanuman who burned entire cities, who crushed armies with mountains, who leapt across oceans, not for war, but for love. His strength comes from remembrance. He is the protector who knows who he serves and never forgets. Hanuman's name is inscribed in countless households, temples, and amulets, not because he is feared, but because he is trusted. His presence is said to ward off all spirits, especially Pishachas and Bhutas. Even now, on Tuesdays and Saturdays across India, you'll hear the Hanuman Chalisa, chanted with unwavering rhythm. Each line is a hammer strike against unseen darkness, each verse a shield. These divine beings are more than characters in myth. They are archetypes of defense, manifestations of cosmic immunity. In Hindu Tantra, they are invoked not just for miracles, but for purification. Durga in battle rites, Kali in exorcisms, Narasimha in protection mantras for children, Hanuman in rituals against black magic. And they do not arrive as light alone. Sometimes, they come through dream, through trance, through statues that seem to breathe. There are stories whispered, never written, of Kali appearing in remote cremation grounds, guiding Agoras through spiritual initiation, of Narasimha emerging in visions during moments of unbearable fear, roaring not to harm, but to drive back the invisible enemy, of Hanuman appearing to travelers lost in forests, taking the form of a wandering priest, then vanishing once safety is found. Their power lies not just in their force, but in their timing. They come when the sacred is threatened. They rise when the balance is lost. They do not linger, because once the darkness retreats, they return to silence, until they are needed again. We do not worship them to beg, we remember them to become. To hold their image in the heart is to declare war on the part of us that gives in to fear. Because the demons are not always outside, and the gods are not always far away. Sometimes, all it takes is one breath, one name, one moment of unshakable clarity, and the protector awakens, not from the heavens, but from within.
We search for demons in shadows, in ruins, in forbidden texts, and forgotten temples. We light fires, chant mantras, trace symbols of power to keep them at bay. But the deepest, most enduring demons
have never lived in jungles or cemeteries. They live in us, and they wear our faces. Asuras, Rakshas, Danavas, names etched in myth, yet they do not only belong to stories, they are archetypes, timeless manifestations of internal chaos. Their war with the gods is not only cosmic, it is psychic, because the battlefield has always been the soul. The Asura is not just a being of old, it is the whisper of pride, swelling until it believes itself untouchable, the voice that tells you, you are above correction, above consequence, above all others, like Hiranyakashipu, who demanded worship, not out of devotion, but domination. His descent into madness was not a fall, it was a choice. He did not become a demon by accident. He became one by believing he was a god. How many today walk that same path? The Rakshasa hides behind another mask, one of hunger, not physical, but psychological. It is the part of us that devours without end, desires that mutate into addiction, needs that become obsessions. The Rakshasa lures with illusion, offering escape, gratification, power, but always at a cost, and when we feed it too long, it begins to feed on us. The Danava is more cunning. It does not roar, it reasons, it corrupts through knowledge, misused, logic, without wisdom, intelligence, without compassion. The Danava is the voice that weaponizes truth, that knows how to manipulate, to deceive, to convince. Maya Danava, the architect of illusions, built entire worlds to trap the divine. But how many of us build illusions for ourselves every day? Lies we dress as logic, justifications we wear like armor. In ancient Vedic literature, these beings existed alongside the Devas, not in opposition, but in balance. Light was never pure light. Darkness was never just evil. The Daityas, children of Diti, were once divine. The Danavas, born of Danu, were beings of vast knowledge and power. They were not cast into shadow, they stepped into it, one choice at a time, and we mirror them. Pride becomes the Asura, jealousy becomes the Rakshasa, manipulation becomes the Danava, grief that curdles into hatred, fear that hardens into cruelty. These are not just emotions, they are invitations. The demon does not need to appear with claws and fangs. It enters as a thought, unchallenged, a wound, unhealed, a truth, denied, and then it grows. Even the scriptures knew this. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes the demonic nature as rooted in excessive ego, false pride, harshness, and ignorance. He does not speak of them as entities lurking in the forest, but as qualities within us. He warns not of external enemies, but of the mind that becomes the enemy of the self. This is why the most terrifying demons in Hindu mythology often resemble humans. Ravana, with 10 heads, each representing a powerful emotion, unchecked. Kumbhakarna, whose sleep symbolizes inertia and spiritual laziness. Tataka, once a woman, consumed by rage until she lost her humanity. Their forms are mythic, but their essence is intimate. We recognize them because we have been them. And if the ancient stories teach us anything, it is this: demons are not to be feared, they are to be understood. They show us what happens when we abandon balance, when we chase power without purpose, when we stop listening to the divine whisper and follow only our own noise. This is why true exorcism is not about casting something out, it is about bringing something in. Light, discipline, awareness. The moment you see the demon not as a monster, but as a mirror, the power shifts. It loses its grip, because demons cannot hold what is willing to be seen. Modern psychology echoes this ancient truth. Carl Jung spoke of the shadow self, the repressed part of our psyche, that when ignored becomes destructive, but when faced, integrated, and understood, becomes a source of strength. This is not a coincidence. Jung studied Eastern philosophy deeply. He understood that mythology was never just story, it was instruction. Even the devas, the gods, are not perfect. They lose, they falter, they must seek help. Why? Because the lesson has never been about good versus evil. It has always been about balance. Asuras were once devas. The line between them is choice. So when you feel rage rise in your throat, or greed tighten your fists, or fear shrink your world, do not run. Look deeper. Ask what part of you has been left in the dark. Ask which voice inside you've refused to hear, because that is where the demon waits. And if you listen long enough, not to obey it, but to understand it, it may show you the chain it wears, the wound it guards, the moment it broke, and then you will see what the ancients saw, that even the darkest asura was once light, that every demon is a story, half told, waiting for the rest of you to remember.
What if all these stories about demons aren't fiction but forgotten keys to understanding ourselves? What if these beings aren't here to frighten us, but to remind us, not just of forces beyond our comprehension, but of forces that sleep inside us? Asuras, Rakshas, Danavas, Pishachas, they are not only heroes of ancient legends, they are symbols, inner codes of our experience, our pain, our desires. They are the shadows that follow us from the moment we're born. Hinduism never divided the world into pure good and absolute evil. Its depth lies in the understanding of balance. Where there is light, there will always be shadow. Where there is a god, there will be a demon, and vice versa, because darkness is not the enemy. It is a trial. It asks only one question. Are you ready to look within? Not to be afraid, but to see. The Asura is pride that grows when you place yourself above others. The Rakshasa is hunger for temptation that knows no boundaries. The Danava is intellect without morality. And the Pishacha is the pain you buried so deep it began to rot inside. All of these forms, they are not something external. They are us, in moments of weakness, rage, despair, hopelessness. But if the demon lives within us, so does the god. We are not evil. We are unfinished, and it is precisely in our battle with these inner shadows that we grow. Even the gods in Hinduism are not perfect. They become angry, they doubt, they search, and that is their greatness, because strength is not in being flawless. It is in the ability to return to truth after falling. The ancient Rishis, the sages, didn't describe demons to scare us. They described them so we could recognize ourselves, because once you've seen the demon in yourself, you're no longer its slave. You can transform it into strength, into compassion, into awareness. So the Rakshasa that devours flesh becomes hunger for truth. The Danava that creates illusion becomes the ability to see through it. The Pishacha that feeds on pain becomes the door to empathy. And the Asura, who challenges the gods, becomes the force to create a new order. But this transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires courage, because it is always easier to see darkness in others than in yourself, easier to destroy an enemy than to befriend your shadow. Yet in that lies the deepest alchemy of the soul. Transformation doesn't begin with victory, it begins with awareness. This knowledge is not new. It's woven into every ritual, every mantra, every line of sacred text. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of the demonic nature, not as something outside of us, but as an inner state. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves that controls us until we face it.
Different eras, different languages, the same truth. In temples of South India, carvings of demons stand by the entrances. They don't frighten the faithful, they protect them, because only those who have met their shadow can enter the sacred. These demons remind us to walk into the divine. You must first walk through yourself. This video was not merely a journey through demonology. It was a journey through yourself, through dark legends, cursed kings, eternal battles of light and shadow that don't play out in some distant cosmos, but within you. And now, as we close this path, one question remains. What shadow stands behind your shoulder? Don't ignore it. Don't fear it. Look closer. Perhaps it is your doorway to the strength you forgot. Perhaps it is your moment of awakening. Because once you look it in the eyes, it is no longer a demon. It becomes an answer. And if this story awakens something within you, don't let that feeling fade. Keep walking forward, because this was only the beginning. And if you want to know what comes next, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, what shadow do you see behind your shoulder? Maybe it's your word that will start the next story.